The life we live appears ordinary and measured: school, university, work, family, daily routine, a never-ending cycle of events. We live in our own world, paying little attention to what happens around us. Watching news reports or TV shows about terrible incidents or crimes, we absorb the information without deeply engaging with it. What happened is horrific, we think, but it's far away and not our concern. Yet, evil is closer than it seems. Unfortunately, no one is completely safe from it. That's why it's important to cherish what we have. Even a simple, mundane life isn't the worst scenario. I believe the families of those who encountered the dark side of life would agree, and the victims themselves would give anything to avoid the nightmare they endured and have a chance at a healthy future. What have you heard about serial criminals and perpetrators? Mentally ill individuals, heartless villains, crazy geniuses. They manage to commit terrible crimes for a long time and remain unpunished. They hold entire neighborhoods and cities in fear. However, most of them eventually get caught. Some accidentally come to the attention of the police. Others leave clues intentionally, wanting to be caught. Such characters receive significant attention in literature and film. We pick up a book or watch a thriller to give ourselves a fright, but we always have the option to stop reading or turn off the movie. Unfortunately, this choice isn't available in real life for those who fall into their traps. There probably isn't a single country in the world that hasn't faced such a situation. The new criminal story will tell us about an unstable maniac who operated in Belgium. Ronald Jansen. Ronald Allen Jansen was born on February 6, 1971, in the city of Bordeaux, Limburg province, Belgium. He was the third of 4 children in the family. His father worked as a miner and his mother as a housekeeper. From childhood, Ronnie realized he could only rely on himself. To escape poverty, he needed a push, and he decided that the best path to success would be through a future profession. So the teenager studied diligently. Teachers treated him well at school and distinguished him from others. This, of course, didn't please his peers. At home, relations with his parents left much to be desired. Mr. Jansen had a bad temper and often lashed out at his family. As Ronnie grew older, he realized this behavior was abnormal and left home. After some time, his mother and the other children followed his example. Thanks to his knowledge, our protagonist easily got into a university in Hasselt. Later, he changed his mind about his chosen major and transferred to Leuven, where he studied engineering. Since money was tight, he actively worked part-time during his studies and helped his family. Finally, in 1993, he earned his long-awaited ticket to life, a diploma in industrial engineering with honors. That same year, Ronald met a girl. Natalie was 3 years older than him, born in the Netherlands. However, the age and cultural differences didn't bother the couple at all. They liked each other immediately and started dating. In 1995, the couple married. The following year, they moved to Genk, where his wife got a job offer. The head of the family also found work quickly, as his skills were in demand everywhere. He took a job as a technical and production manager. In 1998, Ronnie unexpectedly changed fields and started teaching mechanics and computer science at a local school. It must be said that he excelled in this area as well. He was respected and recognized. Everyone considered Jansen an educated and intelligent man, easy to talk to. In 2000, the family moved again, this time to Halan, where Ronald began teaching computer science, economics, and applied mechanics. As for his personal life, it initially seemed to be going well. Our protagonist didn't want to repeat his father's mistakes, so he tried to remain calm in his relationships. He and his wife dreamed of having a large family. In 1998, their first daughter was born, and 3 years later, their second. However, the arrival of children played a fatal role. You see, Ronald had suffered from chronic insomnia his whole life. With the birth of his daughters, his sleep problems worsened. Due to the constant crying and noise in the house, Ronald became irritable. The couple began to have misunderstandings and arguments. To cope with his condition and the growing tension, the head of the family often went for walks to get some fresh air. Eventually, the marriage began to fall apart. In 2006, Natalie left him, taking the children with her. Many acquaintances noted that Ronald changed after the divorce. He became quiet, withdrawn, and possibly depressed. Neighbors often saw him walking alone at night. However, the respected professor explained it as a sleep disorder. Although his behavior seemed strange, it didn't cause much alarm. Nevertheless, on January 4, 2010, there was a knock on Jansen's door. Fire on the highway. The reason for visiting Ronald was a recent incident. On a highway near the city of Diest, a car, an Opel Corsa, caught fire. On January 3rd at 2:43 a.m., a call was made to emergency services. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they discovered people inside the burning vehicle. Unfortunately, they couldn't be saved. The bodies of the two individuals were sent for examination. However, unexpected circumstances emerged during the autopsy. Using dental records, the bodies were identified. It was determined that 18-year-old Shauna Appletans and 22-year-old Kevin Paulus lost their lives due to gunshot wounds long before the fire occurred. This means someone ended the lives of the young people and then set the car on fire to cover their tracks. The double crime disturbed the local residents, who feared going out at night or letting their children play outside. They connected the incident to the crime of a young girl 3 years earlier. They demanded an immediate investigation to find and punish the criminal. The police were also eager to start the investigation and reassure the public. Many questions arose. Who were Kevin Paulus and Shauna Appletans? Who was responsible for their deaths and why? And perhaps the most pressing, was there a connection between this crime and the other incident? The disappearance of Anic. The small town of Diest was deeply upset that the tragic passing of 18-year-old Anic van Eitzel had remained unsolved for so long. Anic disappeared on April 27, 2007, after attending a Catholic party. She was a modest, kind girl, a diligent student, and a loyal friend. On that ill-fated Friday, she went with friends to the suburbs. The event she planned to attend was different from the popular ones for her age group. People of all ages attended, from children to adults. Everyone gathered to sing, dance, play games, and socialize. In general, this party had a purely safe and educational format. There was no alcohol or prohibited substances. Her friends recalled that Anic was her usual self that evening, cheerful and sociable. At 4 a.m., everyone dispersed. Like many others, Anic headed home on her bicycle. However, she never made it. Her worried parents began calling her cell phone, but no one answered. There was no word from her, which was unusual for Anic. Later, her friends told when and where they last saw her, but their words didn't bring comfort. The road went through a forest. Initially, they rode together, but their paths diverged at an intersection. She hadn't been seen since. Family and friends participated in the search. When their efforts failed, the Van Eitzel family turned to the police. Detectives began the investigation immediately. 70 police officers, 200 volunteers, and a rescue helicopter joined the search. At the same time, every possible scenario was considered. Close associates and all party attendees were questioned. It was discovered that Anic got along well with her family, so the possibility of her running away from home was ruled out right away. Additionally, she didn't have a boyfriend with whom she might have left. On the surface, there were no apparent reasons for her to end her life either. She had no enemies, no issues, and no psychological disorders. The event attendees didn't notice anything suspicious. None of them seemed suspect. Locals living near the disappearance site didn't see the girl described. Time passed, but Anic, along with her bicycle, remained missing. The route she took was thoroughly analyzed, and every surveillance camera along it was reviewed. The entire area was searched extensively. It was as if she and her bicycle had vanished into thin air. Thus, the police concluded that the missing girl had likely fallen victim to a crime. At the same time, they were struck by the complete lack of evidence. There were no traces of the missing girl, none of her belongings, nor signs of a struggle. Perhaps she was kidnapped. and soon someone would demand a ransom. But even that didn't happen. The hope of finding her alive was quickly fading. However, when flyers with her photo were posted everywhere and her parents spoke to the media, new details emerged. Several people contacted the police, reporting that on the night of April 27th, they heard suspicious screams in the forest. However, they couldn't see anything in the dark. Data from Anic's cell phone also raised false hopes. It was determined that the phone had been turned on and off several times that night and the following morning. The locations where the device was traced were checked, but nothing was found there either. The body and the bicycle. The girl's body was discovered a week later. A passerby in Lummen near the Albert Canal noticed a suspicious package floating on the water while on a walk along the embankment and immediately reported it to the police. The discovery was indeed suspicious, as the package contained a woman's body, carefully wrapped and weighted down with stones to prevent it from surfacing. However, the person who did this didn't account for the strong current and the process of decomposition. Since the body had been in the water for a long time, identifying the woman was difficult. Nevertheless, dental records confirmed the specialist's suspicions. There was no doubt that the woman found was the missing Anic van Oytsel. The autopsy revealed that the cause of her death was a blunt force trauma to the head. Additionally, it was discovered that she had been taken advantage of. The location where her body was found was 16 miles away from where she had disappeared, indicating that the criminal transported the victim to cover their tracks. It seemed that her body might have contained some clues about her tormentor, but no evidence was found. If her bicycle had been found, it might have yielded fingerprints of the perpetrator. Unfortunately, this didn't go as planned either. Several months later, the missing bicycle was found in Leuven, about 50 miles from the scene. The bicycle had been hidden in a secluded spot. The culprit had repainted and thoroughly cleaned it, leaving no traces. The news of Anic's tragic death was devastating. Many had hoped until the end that she would be found alive. For her parents, accepting what happened was unbearable. However, the desire to find the criminal and bring them to justice gave them the strength to keep going. It must be said that after many years, the moment of retribution finally came. A false lead. Initially, there were doubts about the identity of Kevin Paulus, the owner of the burned car. The investigation revealed some interesting facts. First, the young man was well known to the police. He had been involved in multiple fights in the past. By a strange coincidence, Anic's bicycle was found in the city where Shauna, the other victim, lived. Some even speculated that they might have known each other. This led to the theory that Kevin himself could have been the criminal, possibly ending Anic's life first and then, years later, doing the same to Shauna before setting the car on fire and ending his own life. However, this assumption was short-lived. There was no direct evidence, and it was later revealed that the young man hadn't taken his own life but had been brutally deprived of it. The authorities faced a long and challenging investigation. The circumstances of the deaths were horrifying. If both incidents were connected, it meant a serial criminal was involved. The profile of such a person was concerning, intelligent enough to dispose of evidence effectively and cunning enough to remain undetected. This type of criminal is among the most difficult to catch. It takes a lot of time and effort to apprehend them, during which the perpetrator could find another victim. A lead. To learn more about the murdered couple, detectives met with their family and friends, but they provided no information of significant interest to the investigation. The detectives then decided to question the neighbors. The residents mentioned that the young couple lived together, but noticed nothing suspicious on the night of January 2nd to 3rd. However, they did mention a conflict between the victims and another neighbor. According to them, Shauna often quarreled with this seemingly nice man for some reason and would openly express her negative feelings toward him. Kevin would frequently stand up for her. Once, their argument almost escalated into a full-blown fight, but bystanders intervened and the scuffle was stopped. Investigators decided to speak with this suspicious neighbor, and on January 4, 2010, a knock was heard at the apartment of Ronald Jansen. The Professor. The door was opened by a middle-aged man who didn't raise any concerns. He hospitably welcomed the detectives, listened to them, and provided explanations regarding the conflict with the neighboring couple. Ronald admitted that he did occasionally endure Shauna's taunts and Kevin's attacks, but he chalked it up to their youth. When asked where he was on January 2nd, he explained that he was home watching TV. Unfortunately, no one could confirm his alibi. At the same time, Ronnie made it clear that he wasn't involved in what happened to his adversaries and didn't feel any satisfaction or desire for revenge. However, something in his words raised doubts. Moreover, Jansen denied ever being involved in a fight, as he considered himself a well-mannered and respected person who wasn't capable of such behavior. As is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. Despite his outward image, the 39-year-old professor was arrested. Later, a search of his home uncovered a gun hidden in a large bag of cat food. After this unexpected discovery, his behavior changed. During the next interrogation, he was nervous and couldn't explain where the weapon came from. When investigators changed their interrogation tactics, Ronald began to break down. This led to the revelation of the horrific details of the crimes committed by the serial criminal who earned the nickname the Professor. A crime against Kevin and Shauna. Ronnie confessed that on the evening of January 2nd, he couldn't sleep as usual, so he went outside to get some air. While walking, a car with Shauna and Kevin inside pulled up near the house. The hateful neighbors started mocking and insulting him. Unable to endure it, he went back to his apartment, retrieved a gun and a can of gasoline, but by the time he returned, the neighbors had left. He then decided to go to their home and knocked on the door. Shauna opened it. Showing the weapon, he ordered her to be quiet and called for Kevin. He then threatened to end their lives if they didn't drive him to a location he specified. The frightened young couple obeyed, went downstairs, got into the car, and drove out of town. Kevin was behind the wheel, while Shauna sat behind him, effectively trapping her as there were no rear doors. She cried and pleaded for their release, but Ronnie was unmoved. He sat next to the driver, keeping the gun trained on him. In a deserted area, the car stopped. Jansen then shot Kevin twice in the head, ending his life instantly. He then threw Kevin's body out of the car and drove over it. Shauna was crying and begging for her life. In response, the criminal told her he would spare her if she agreed to engage in intimacy with him. The girl complied, but he later went back on his word, deciding it wasn't wise to leave a witness alive. He shot her and dragged Kevin's lifeless body back into the car. Then he drove closer to their home and set the car on fire. Ronald returned through the field, arriving back at 4 a.m. He carefully washed, removed his soiled clothes, and burned them. He then disposed of the ashes in a ditch and hid the gun in the cat food, where it was eventually found. He hadn't managed to dispose of the weapon because he didn't expect to be caught so soon. Ronald insisted that his actions were a matter of honor, claiming that he was defending himself and putting an end to the constant harassment. His words had some validity, as it was later revealed during psychiatric evaluations that certain childhood events, which he had never spoken about, had significantly affected him. Ronnie's childhood. Young Ronnie was often bullied at school, mocked for his lisp. One day, he couldn't take the teasing anymore and fought back, beating his tormentor with a bat. As a result, he was suspended from school. To prevent further conflicts, Mrs. Jansen transferred her son to another school, where he was treated with understanding. However, the hardships didn't end there. The truth is, Ronald also faced mistreatment from his father. This led to a deep fear of being at home and insomnia, which plagued him for the rest of his life. The defendant admitted that at one point he decided to end it all, to take his own life. But he changed his mind, feeling sorry for his mother, who would be left alone. Instead, he decided to eliminate the source of his misery. A plan formed in his mind. His father suffered from diabetes and took insulin injections. Ronnie replaced the medication with another dangerous substance. As a result, his tormentor almost died, but was saved just in time. It was clear to the father whose doing it was. However, he did not go to the police, but instead started to torment his son even more. After that, the young man decided to run away from home. Apparently, the criminal's troubled mind underwent significant changes at a young age, making it impossible for him to tolerate any form of abuse. However, later, it became clear that Jansen's anger was directed not only at his tormentors, but also at innocent people. The crime of Anic. In a shocking turn, Ronald confessed to the crime of Anic, committed in 2007. According to him, she became an unintended victim. That night, he couldn't sleep and decided to drive to another town. Along the way, he encountered a beautiful girl on a bicycle. He wanted to get to know her better, but he chose a poor way to approach her. He blocked her path. Naturally, the girl was frightened, got off her bike, and started to run. Jansen got angry, chased her down, tied her hands, and threatened her with a gun. He then forced her into his car and took her to his home. Ronnie promised to let Anic go if she didn't cause any trouble. The suspect claimed he didn't intend to take advantage of or deprive the girl of her life. He just wanted her to stay with him for a while. By morning, he planned to let her go. However, when he was alone with the girl, his plans changed. He realized he couldn't do what he had told her because she would tell everyone. So, Ronald beat her, took advantage of her, and finally struck her with a hammer. He then disposed of her body by placing it in a bag filled with rocks and throwing it into a canal. When the cold-blooded suspect returned home, he cleaned everything with cleaning agents and destroyed all evidence. His words about just wanting to spend the night with Anic sounded unconvincing. It was clear that the criminal knew exactly what he was doing and understood the consequences. Thus, when he kidnapped the girl, he knew he would end her life. Intimate predator. Later, Ronald confessed to 3 additional assaults he committed while studying in Leuven. However, he couldn't remember the faces of the women or the dates of the incidents. In total, during the investigation, he admitted to 5 similar episodes. Nevertheless, the investigation suggested a different number. He was accused of 20 assaults that occurred between 2001 and 2010 in student dormitories. The suspect would break in through a window, attack, and threaten with a knife. Afterward, he would proceed with intimate acts without any resistance. Additionally, it was believed he could have been involved in a series of 10 crimes committed in 1991, as the method was similar. However, this remains speculation without substantial evidence. The trial. On September 20th, 2011, the defendant stood trial. Zvonimir Miskovich, Ronald's lawyer, tried to mitigate his responsibility by highlighting the positive aspects of his character and his difficult childhood. None of his acquaintances could believe that quiet Ronnie had turned out to be such a monster. His 63-year-old mother testified that she had never seen her son chasing women and considered him a good person. During a visit, he confessed to me that all the crimes happened in moments of madness, she said. I'm devastated, but Ronnie is still my boy. I have to be there for him, no matter how hard it is. Ronald's ex-wife also testified that she had a good relationship with him and trusted him with their children twice a week. I always thought he was a kind and gentle person, she said. This criminal is not the person I knew. The prosecution sought the maximum possible sentence for the defendant. The prosecutor emphasized that they were dealing with a dangerous psychopath, a serial predator, and a criminal who has no place among normal people. Finally, on October 21, 2011, Ronald Jansen was found guilty of the crimes against Anic, Sheila, and Kevin, including their abduction and the assaults on the women with the use of torture. The mitigating circumstances mentioned by the defense were not considered. The court sentenced the defendant to life imprisonment. Controversial justice. On September 10, 2012, Ronald was found guilty of 12 assaults committed with the threat of using a weapon, multiple attempts on life, as well as torture and barbarism. However, given the previous sentence, the new verdict did not add any additional punishment. One might think that a life sentence is a fair judgment for a mass criminal. Unfortunately, practice in Belgium suggests otherwise. Offenders with such sentences spend between 15 to 23 years behind bars and are then released. In fact, by 2026, Jansen could be eligible for parole and continue his bloody crimes. It seems the professor was aware of this, which is why he smiled during the trial and showed no remorse for the sentence he received. The case of Sheila LaBar, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others, but sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Rain believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila LaBar. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila LaBar was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila LaBar? Sheila LaBar was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice, adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, LaBar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strasut filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill LaBar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon LaBar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself LaBar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, But soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila for the first time didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill LaBar died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. It got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch LaBar constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, LaBar met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael DeLodge. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and LaBar remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, he had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy LaBar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at LaBar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find LaBar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings, but that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Deloge, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made: a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since LaBar's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder, as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Ennis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. LaBar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. No body, no case. It was said in English law after the miracle of Campton. But in our story, there is no body, but there is a case. On a November morning in 2011, Galina Kolyadzinskaya returned home to her rented apartment on Uborovicha Street in Vladivostok and disappeared. 3 years later, her boyfriend Victor Cohen was convicted of her murder. But no physical evidence of Galina's alleged death was presented at the trial, and her parents still believe she is alive and are waiting for her return. In April 2024, Victor Cohen was released from prison, and the case regained popularity, dividing the public into 2 camps. Some believe that Victor served time for a crime that did not happen, while others are convinced that the sentence received for murder is too short. Let's find out together how a high-profile criminal case about the disappearance and murder of a man with no evidence progressed throughout the country, causing controversy among observers and the creation of groups to search for Galina. Viktor Polovov was born July 9, 1988 in Vladivostok. He took the surname Cohen in 2012. Parents divorced when the boy was very young, so his upbringing completely fell on the female shoulders of his mother and grandmother. In 2005, he graduated from high school, gymnasium of the Far Eastern State University. He entered the Institute of Mass Communications of the same university at the Department of PR, but after 6 months, he dropped out. In 2007, Ilona Kolyadzinskaya introduced her classmate Victor to her sister Galina, who was 3.5 years older than him. Galina Kolyadzinskaya was born on April 22, 1985 in Rostov-on-Don. At the age of 13, her parents moved to Vladivostok. The girl was distinguished by a bright appearance, stood out theatricalized manner of dressing. She was slender, well-read, and very artistic. She graduated from school, studied at an art school, then entered the Faculty of Design of the Far Eastern Federal University. Victor was smitten with her, and for the first time, he truly fell in love. Both of them dreamed of entering the Theater Institute, so Victor dropped out of school and they left their native Vladivostok for Moscow. Galina failed the entrance exams, but Vitya did not. But out of solidarity with his favorite girl, he decided to return home. Both returned to Vladivostok, where they started living together. On his return, Victor learned about his grandfather's death and the inheritance he had left him. With this money, the lovers rented an apartment in the city center, bought a car each, and decided to invest the remaining sum in a profitable business. They tried to organize a shop for the production of car tires, opened a network of donut shops, and even resold church Sheila. But all projects quickly went into loss, which led the young couple in despondency. Over time, disagreements between the young people began to destroy their relationship. The couple quarreled violently, and it did not do without violence. Once Galina's friends witnessed a quarrel between them when Victor lifted his girlfriend by the neck. However, Galina sometimes did the same. She could hit her boyfriend or break the furniture in their rented apartment. Eventually, Galina started going to nightclubs more and more often, and Victor became interested in other women, running away from the problems in his current life. On the morning of November 14, 2011, Galina returned home after another visit to the club and was very much on her merry way. Victor was not at home, which made Galina furious, and at 6:43 a.m. she called him and demanded his immediate return. 15 minutes later, Victor was already in their rented apartment. A quarrel took place between the young people, as a result of which they decided to finally part ways. Instead of the previously donated car, Galina demanded 300,000 rubles from Victor, and then she would leave and not bother him. Victor gave her the money, and she left the apartment, as it turned out, forever. The next day, Galina's parents got worried and started calling her, but her phone was switched off. Victor did not answer their calls either. Only on the second day after Galina left, he contacted the girl's mother and told her that there had been a quarrel. She had extorted a large sum of money from him, then packed her things and left. "You will never see me again. Don't look for me. Tell my mom that everything is fine with me." Galina's last words from Victor's words. He also told Galina's mother that he repeatedly called her after she left, but the girl did not answer his calls either, because the phone was simply turned off. At first, friends and parents of the missing Galina were not surprised by her sudden disappearance, because she was famous for her flighty behavior and could disappear for several days. But 3 days later, Galina Kolyadzinskaya's father wrote a statement to the police about his daughter's disappearance, and the law enforcement agencies began to search for her. Specialists zealously took up the case, and Victor was first of all summoned to the station for a conversation. He was the last person to see Galina and could clarify many points of interest. During the interrogation, Victor did not deny that he often quarreled with his girlfriend, whom he had grown cold to and had another woman. Victor said that he was fed up with his scandalous girlfriend, who in a fit of jealousy could raise her hand against him or pour yogurt on his car. Once, being in an inebriated state, Galina said she would tear her rival's hair out if he continued to date her. "I didn't kill Galina. Yes, we quarreled with her. She packed her things, took all our money, 300,000 rubles, and left. Where she went, I don't know," Victor insisted. The investigation team also examined the apartment where the young people lived together, both their cars, but no traces of blood or other evidence pointing to Galina's murder were found. Victor was even tested on a lie detector. During the interview, the young man was confused in his testimony, but his involvement in Galina's disappearance was not proven. Having questioned Galina's acquaintances and neighbors, the police decided to refuse to initiate a criminal case, as no signs of corpus delicti were found. However, Galina had never traveled outside Vladivostok. She did not have a foreign passport. Victor collected Galina's belongings and gave them to her parents, and he himself moved in with his new girlfriend Tatiana and started a new life. The feelings of young people were so strong that in 2012 they decided to get married. It was then that Victor finally got rid of his father's surname, which had been weighing him down since childhood. He liked the Cohen option, which was offered by his future wife, who heard the beautiful surname in one of the movies. Everyone forgot about the missing Galina Kolyadzinskaya for several years. 3 years of married life of a young married couple, Cohen flew quite happily. They traveled a lot, went to the mountains and lived a quiet and measured life. But everything changed when the case of Galina's disappearance was reclassified as a murder case, because for 3 years she never showed up. Galina's mother, Elena Kolyadzinskaya, did not worry much at first. She knew that her daughter was a creative and fickle nature, could go somewhere just by mood. Perhaps this explains why the case did not become a criminal case for almost 3 years, because no one insisted. In June 2014, based on the materials of the inspection on the fact of Galina Kolyadzinskaya's unknown disappearance, a criminal case under the article murder was initiated. The girl was put on the wanted list as missing, and employees of the Crime Investigation Department began to work out various versions of Galina's disappearance, from going abroad to work in the modeling business to murder. In the course of working out the latter version, Kolyadzinskaya's ex-boyfriend came to the attention of the police. It turned out that Cohen and Galina often quarreled. The girl made him jealous scenes because of his relationship with another woman. There was also information that Galina was planning a trip to Korea. In her youth, she had already worked as a model in China and was going to continue her career in this field. Ex-boyfriend Victor Cohen became the main suspect because he was the last person who saw Galina alive. The testimony regarding the facts of Galina's disappearance, which Victor and witnesses had previously given at various stages of the case, also gave reason to believe that Victor might be involved in the crime. On July 23, 2014, Victor was summoned for questioning, where he was detained and taken to the investigation unit. There, he confessed that after another quarrel, in the morning of November 14, 2011, he strangled Galina, subsequently dismembered the body in the bathroom, put the remains in 3 plastic buckets, took them to a wooded area near the factory Variag, where he built a fire with tires, burned the body, and scattered the ashes in different places. Victor Cohen behaved confidently during the interrogation. He spoke to the investigator on "you," did not choose expressions, and swore a lot. He frankly, as at a friendly conversation, told the story of his life from birth to the present day. Experienced operatives were amazed at the coolness and cynicism with which he recalled how he dismembered and burned Galina. The former lover sat in front of the police officers with his feet on the ground and smiled. He felt invulnerable. Victor lamented to the investigator that he had originally intended to boil the body in a steamer, put it through a meat grinder, and flush it down the toilet. But he eventually abandoned this method, fearing that the sewer system would be clogged and he could be identified. At the same interrogation, he stated that he strangled Galina because she was interfering with his new relationship. According to Victor's memories, his ex-girlfriend was an unconventional person who craved attention. She often disappeared in nightclubs, and because of the fiery temper, could make a loud scandal at home. In conversations, Galina often mentioned that she would like a beautiful life of an escort model, and at the same time did not want to believe the arguments that without the provision of services of an intimate nature, such work is impossible. Victor accepted all the eccentric actions of his friend and continued to consider her a pleasant and interesting person until a certain time. From Victor Cohen's interrogation, "I was taken by annoyance. I was standing near the coffee machine. I took a coffee. As I stood there, something in me turned. There was this one person, and that was it. I went home, walked over to her sleeping, said, 'I'm sorry,' and started choking her. She woke up, started to struggle. I strangled her for a long time. Then I left the house and cried. It wasn't fear, it was frustration, loss. I realized what I had done, but as a rational person, I did not lose my temper. After the interrogation, the operatives took Victor to the house where he lived with Galina Kolyadzinskaya in November 2011 for an investigative experiment. In the apartment, Victor demonstrated how he strangled Galina on a folding sofa that night. According to him, she did not resist, as she was drunk and fell asleep. When he was convinced that she was dead, he left the apartment in a hurry and went to his car, where he came up with a cold-blooded plan to get rid of the body. Victor learned about the intricate way to get rid of the body from a documentary about India, where the bodies of the deceased are burned and quite often use car tires for this ritual to reach the right burning temperature. Victor told the operatives that it was much easier to kill and dispose of the body than he had imagined. Late at night, Victor was taken to the very vacant lot where he allegedly disposed of Galina's remains. In pitch darkness, Cohen had to point out the specific place where he had burned the girl's body. According to human rights activists, he was taken to a place where there were no traffic or CCTV cameras, so that there was no way to prove his innocence. The case also lacked important details, which Victor himself pointed out repeatedly. It was not clear how and what he used to cut up the body, because an ordinary kitchen knife could not be used. Further, it was not quite clear how he managed to put Galina's remains in 3 buckets, and how he carried these buckets out of the entrance in full view of everyone and why no one paid attention to it. Then the investigation questioned the Bygolovs, who rented the apartment to Galina and Victor. They admitted that they were unable to contact Victor after they learned that the police were in the apartment. When they arrived to check their accommodation, they found the apartment empty. There were no tenants or their belongings. On the ceiling, they found brown-colored splatters, as the couple thought it was from coffee or tea, and there were black streaks on the wallpaper, most likely from storing car tires. But the detainee, Victor Cohen, did not know that his interrogations were recorded by a video camera. When he realized that he had told too much on camera, he recanted his testimony, stating that during the interrogation at the Operative Investigation Unit on Karbasheva Street, they forced confessions out of him using unauthorized interrogation methods, and when his wife Tatiana came to the same station, Victor was threatened that they would harm her as well. He added that the story he told during the hour-long interrogation was made up by the operative officers, and that the place where the remains were burnt was determined based on his phone billing that night. But was torture really torture? In the CCTV footage from the investigation unit, Tatiana Cohen drove up to the building at 6 p.m. She was not allowed inside, so she stayed outside. 20 minutes later, Victor was brought in for questioning, and Tatiana also entered the building around 6:30 p.m. The recording of the interrogation started at 6:38 p.m., tortured for 8 minutes, whipped out a confession, made up a colorful and bloodthirsty story in great detail. On August 11, 2015, as a result of the first court hearing, Victor Cohen was found guilty of the murder of Galina Kolyadzinskaya, and by the court verdict of August 11, 2015, he was sentenced to 9 years, 10 months of imprisonment, with serving his sentence in a penal colony of strict regime. After Victor Cohen was charged with murder, his wife Tatiana became his most faithful defense counsel, convinced of his innocence. All Vladivostok residents actively followed the story and even went out to rallies in support of Victor Cohen. People divided themselves into defenders and accusers. Victor's wife continued to fight for her husband and did not lower her hands even after the terrible news that her spouse would have to spend almost 10 years behind bars. The revealing video, which was kept in the criminal case, was shown during the court session. The case became a high-profile one because during the court proceedings, Victor said that confessions were beaten out of him by interrogators with the help of threats and torture, as evidenced by hospital discharges, where he was diagnosed with concussion and ear barotrauma. A young, handsome man with huge brown eyes had strangled, dismembered, and burned his girlfriend in cold blood. No one could believe it. Charismatic guy could become an actor. He was even admitted to the Moscow Theater Institute. True, as we already know, Victor refused to study. Friends, classmates, just acquaintances from all sides described him positively. Lawyers built their defense on the fact that in the apartment, where, according to the investigation, the murder took place, and at the place where he burned the body, not even traces of human DNA were found. There were even witnesses who allegedly saw Galina in the city after she disappeared. The public was fueled by Galina's mother, Elena Kolyadzinskaya. The unhappy woman sincerely believed that her daughter was alive. In all interviews, she said that Victor was not guilty, and Galina would soon come back and tell why she had disappeared and where she had been all this time. After the guilty verdict, Victor Cohen continued to call the circumstances of the murder, presented to the investigation, completely invented. After all, no biological traces were found at the alleged place of burning the remains of the victim. The forensic examination, conducted in Cohen's car and apartment, did not give convincing results either. The defendant was also sided with Galina's parents, who were convinced that their daughter was alive. The defendant's lawyer, Ivan Mikhailev, said at the time that the investigation had no objective evidence. The examination of the soil at the clearing, where his client allegedly burned the body, also yielded nothing. The examination did not show any biological traces. Later, it turned out that some of the case materials were also missing: inspection reports of the apartment and the car, lie detector data, and video from the camera, which were obtained back in 2011. Cohen's family and defense believed that the case was reclassified in order to relieve himself of responsibility for the unsolved crime. Galina was never found. Not agreeing with the court verdict, Victor filed an appeal and began to claim that he was not involved in the commission of the incriminated crime, and the confession was forced out of him by law enforcement officers. Tatiana Cohen launched a large-scale campaign in support of her husband. She appeared on various talk shows and programs, gathered rallies, actively maintained social networks, where she actively collected money for a lawyer, in return posting fake reports. On December 7, 2015, the Court of Appeals overturned the verdict due to violations of the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the case was sent to the Court of First Instance for a new trial in a different court. After the retrial by the Court of First Instance, Victor Cohen was also found guilty of the murder of Halina Kolyadzinskaya, and by the verdict of June 21, 2016, he was sentenced to 9 years and 9 months of imprisonment, with serving his sentence in a strict regime colony. The sentence was again appealed, but this time the Court of Appellate Instance on November 28, 2016 upheld the sentence, and Victor Cohen went to serve his sentence. After the appeal, Tatiana withdrew from all affairs, divorced Victor, and remarried. As it turned out, her role as a wife was a carefully planned game, because Tatiana began a new relationship immediately after Victor's detention. Nobody expected such a turn of events. Tatiana herself refused to comment. Despite the fact that the body of Halina Kolyadzinskaya was not found, the court ruled on the basis of circumstantial evidence against Victor Cohen, and there was plenty of it. First of all, this confession, in which Victor says that after the murder he decided to get rid of the body by grinding it in a meat grinder. He went to the shopping center Maxim for it, where he actually bought a meat grinder and a pressure cooker in the Domatechnica store. In 2015, the investigation made a seizure of records from the database of the store about the purchases of meat grinders for November 14, 2011, and in one of the records was the surname Polovov. The time on the billing and the receipt from the database of the store coincide. Also, the store administrator confirmed in court that there was no tampering with the database for the purpose of falsification. Further, Victor Cohen's cell phone billings played an important role in the verdict. On November 14, 2011, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., Victor stayed in the apartment. Most likely, he dismembered the body, and at night he took buckets with the body to the woods near the Variag plant. Victor repeatedly reported that he called Galina after she left, but her phone was unavailable. However, Victor's phone billing showed that he did not call Galina between 10 a.m. and night. The last phone conversation he had was with Tatiana at 11:51 p.m., just in the neighborhood of the Variag plant. Moreover, if you listen to the court sessions where the billing of Galina Kolyadzinskaya and Victor is announced, it is obvious that after Galina's disappearance, her relatives, friends, even Victor's mother called her, but not Victor himself. Given the fact that everyone is looking for Galina and Victor is under suspicion, if it were him, anyone would send at least a message to his missing friend. But Victor didn't do it. Obviously, he knew there would be no answer. Also in the case were sales receipts for 3 20-liter plastic buckets with lids and locks, bought the same day as the meat grinder. Unfortunately, there is no last name on the receipts, so it is not proven that it was Victor Cohen who bought them. But how could Galina fit into 3 20-liter buckets? Another piece of circumstantial evidence was the enamel in the bathroom. Victor dismembered Galina in the bathtub, having covered everything with foil to hide the traces of blood. He then scrubbed the tub with a metal brush with such force that he erased the enamel. In the confession video, Victor voiced that Galina had ruined the enamel on the bathtub by regularly cleaning it with alkaline or acidic products. Witnesses who claimed to have seen Galina at a supermarket in Vladivostok and at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow after she went missing turned out to be false. According to the airport's CCTV cameras, a similar girl was not found. A criminal case was opened against one of the witnesses under the article on giving false testimony. While studying this case, the only and the main question was spinning in my head. So why were no other clues found? It is impossible to anticipate and hide even the smallest details. After all, if Victor really killed Galina, at least some traces must remain. And the answer was simple. It's time. For the first few days, Victor wouldn't let the police into his apartment. He immediately moved in with Tatiana, and the owners of the apartment knew nothing about what had happened. He finally took his belongings only on December 8th. No one opened the door to the police officer who came to check on him. The police did not get into the apartment until 12 days later. They did not use luminol but simply fixed the situation. On December 10th, the owners of the apartment started renovation. The 2 cars were inspected only on December 27th. Let me remind you that Galina disappeared on November 14th. Consequently, Victor had about 3 weeks to clean the apartment and cover his tracks, and a month and a half to clean the interior of the car. Why, then, were neither traces of DNA nor Galina's remains found? According to the conclusion of experts, it is still possible to completely burn the body in artisanal conditions, and that's exactly what happened in this case. The black pieces, which Victor said he scattered in the forest near the place of burning, could be scattered by wild animals, thus depriving the investigation of the last possible evidence. Victor burned Galina, who had been dismembered into pieces, on tires, giving the right temperature to burn the bones. All that was left of her were black charred bone fragments. He did not specify the exact location of the bonfire, citing the long time lapse. He had forgotten. In order to find the remains of the body would have to sift through a sieve a huge area of the forest. But why, if the killer is found? For more than 13 years, nothing is known about Halina Kolyadzinskaya, and the last day of her life is described from the words of the man who was convicted for her murder. Assuming that Victor Cohen did not kill after all, where could Galina have gone? Experienced retired investigators in an informal conversation with journalists say that in today's world, it is almost impossible to get lost unless you are a professional in the intelligence service. In 13 years, Galina had to be found somehow. Even if she lived abroad under a false name, she could not help but leave traces. After all, even to replace her documents, she would have had to be fingerprinted, which means she would have been identified. Victor Cohen married someone else, claims torture, but never once mentions that Galina will definitely come back, that he is waiting for her, and she will definitely prove his innocence. But he knows perfectly well that the main witness is not there and cannot be. Not once did Victor say that he served time innocently, that 10 years of his life were stolen from him, that he lost his beloved wife Tatiana, who preferred not to wait for him from prison. He has no grudge against the system, no desire to fight for his honest name, to sue, to prove his innocence. He knows that the body will never be found. He burned it to the ground. There is no evidence. This gives him the opportunity to make up all these versions of the disappearance, and he behaves just as if he had served time for his crime. Now he is clean. What claims can there be? He was convicted. He served time. He has redeemed everything. An innocent person would not be so cold-blooded as to incriminate himself, and even in such detail. Despite the already closed case, many people all over the country still can't believe what happened. They are still looking for Galina on their own. For this purpose, they place ads on forums and periodically post photos of girls who resemble her very much, because Galina's parents are still waiting for her to come home. Any life, even the most shameful, can be wrapped up in a beautiful wrapper. If you tell it in a calm voice and present the negative character as a victim of circumstances, You are sure to feel sympathy and regret for him. The fact is that many bad people have charisma, strength, cunning, and we sincerely believe that they were not always bad, because often they made such circumstances, and we, without noticing, find excuses for their disreputable deeds. But today we will not justify illegal actions and certainly will not cover anyone. After learning about this case, you will decide for yourself whether their actions are worth justification. On April 4, 2015, emergency services received an eerie call from a local resident. A terrified male voice yelled into the phone to the dispatcher that he had gone into a friend's living room to turn on the lights and check on him, but when he went up to the second floor of the room, he saw blood everywhere. The victim's friend reported that everything was covered in blood, and the injured man was not breathing. After police arrived, the unincorporated community of Alette in Montgomery County was shocked by the brutal murder of 59-year-old local resident Charles Taylor. The crime scene looked like the subject of nightmares and resembled the set of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the carpet, on the paintings, and the couch where the murdered man was located was completely soaked in blood. The brutality of the crime made it look like a grudge drama. After all, definitely, the attacker wanted not only Charles's death, but also to cause him as long as possible unbearable pain, time after time stabbing a sharp knife. The examination of the house showed no visible signs of forced entry, and Charles's bloody body was lying upstairs in his room, which meant that the criminal knew the house and acted decisively. The forensic medical examination found that Charles Taylor suffered blunt force trauma to the back of his head and 31 stab wounds, as a result of which he died. Charles Taylor was considered a kind and generous man, had an adult son with whom he had a good relationship. He adored his 2 grandchildren and daughter-in-law Amanda. This is the part of life that people see and draw conclusions about the family's well-being. But was this really how things were in the Taylor family? So let's get to the bottom of this ugly family drama. The initial investigation was relatively slow as the police didn't have many leads to work with. They started looking for Charles's acquaintances, but couldn't find anyone who had a motive or intent to harm him. Then came the theory that it was someone in Charles Taylor's family, and it didn't take them long to find out the name of the assailant. In fact, that's when investigators got lucky, and were approached by a crime blogger with photos of Amanda Taylor posing for selfies against Charles's lifeless body. She has been put on the wanted list. Amanda Barbara Nicole Taylor was born on March 27, 1991 in Christiansburg, Virginia. There is not much information about Amanda's childhood. It is only known that it was difficult because both of her parents spent some time in prison. Amanda's youth began with a lot of problems that she created for herself. After meeting Mariah Roback, Amanda's illicit life began a merry-go-round. Together, they got into a lot of trouble. On October 23, 2005, according to Montgomery County Sheriff's records, when the girls were just 12 years old, Amanda and Mariah jumped into a car and ran away from home, which they were charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In early April 2006, Amanda was charged with disorderly conduct at the middle school she attended. She yelled that she hated the place, hated all the people there, and would definitely kill them all. This incident definitely went beyond the threshold of the standard teen drama, and this is only a small known portion of Amanda's police station record. In 9th grade, Amanda met Rex Taylor, who was 2 years older than her, and they began dating. Amanda and Rex were born on the same day, March 27th. They both considered it a sign from above. Amanda dropped out of school completely when she found out she was expecting a baby. She and Rex married and soon had a son, but motherhood did not stop her criminal tendencies. The years of her married life were also punctuated by more run-ins with the law. The number of reports on Amanda Taylor in the police station grew exponentially, so recorded another attempted absconding after stealing a vehicle, a conviction for possession of alcohol, numerous domestic altercations, and a criminal record for possession of a controlled substance. Her husband, Rex Taylor, was not from a model family either, and despite their devotion to each other, Rex desperately struggled with addictions and the depression they caused. From the age of 15, the young lad had an addiction to illegal substances. After a while, the couple had a daughter, and at first, it seemed that Amanda still took up the mind and became a model mother and wife. Let even a little not like all American women in their 20s, and with piercings, tattoos, and certainly daily selfies in social networks. But also the family relationship between Amanda and Rex was not quite ordinary. The couple fanatically studied biographies of famous serial criminals and wrote letters to them in prison. Amanda began fantasizing about becoming a criminal herself. But before Amanda could realize this deadly dream, tragedy struck the family. The complicated relationship between the spouses was overshadowed by Amanda's suspicions of her husband's infidelity. In April 2014, their paths finally separated, and the couple parted. Rex returned to the family home, where he again began to use illegal substances. 4 months after the move, his lifeless body was discovered in a shed on the property. He had hanged himself on the day of his son's 7th birthday. After losing her beloved husband, Amanda lived with her mother and friend Mariah Robach from time to time. While staying with her friend Mariah, she also began a friendship with Sean Ball, another member of the Robach family. On March 27, 2015, on their shared birthday, Amanda went to Rex's grave and attempted to end her life. She was rescued and forcibly admitted to a psychiatric hospital because her antics and thought processes were clearly distorted and could bring harm to her and others. But despite her mother's insistence and pleas for prolonged treatment, Amanda was quickly released home. Once she was released from the psychiatric hospital, the situation seemed to escalate because of her unstable personality problems. So Mariah and her husband asked Amanda to move out. They also kicked out Mr. Ball, who had fallen madly in love with Amanda. It was during this period of time, when her only true friends seemed to have turned their backs on her, that Amanda developed a deep desire to kill, and the inspiration for this was none other than her late husband, Rex Taylor. She wanted to do Rex justice and make him proud of her, and to do that, it was imperative that someone be skillfully taken dead. During his lifetime, Rex also had a fascination with serial criminals, so much so that his interest had long gone beyond a hobby. He socialized closely with criminals, and it was a friendship he was proud of in his lifetime. Imagine walking out of your house one morning to your mailbox and finding an envelope addressed to you from a notorious serial criminal who was arrested in 1980. Inside the envelope, you are relieved to find no creepy mementos, but instead find a birthday card for your young child along with a handwritten message. Some might argue that such a message would be as horrifying as receiving a severed finger or strand of hair. Either way, for most people, receiving anything in the mail from a serial criminal would be abnormal. But not for Amanda and Rex Taylor's family. Rex's behavior and his willingness to communicate and receive experiences from known serial criminals and Amanda's obsession with crime has been confirmed by some horrifying revelations of past social media posts under her account. In several posts, Amanda glorifies a mass of criminals and their brutal attacks, including the mastermind behind the largest terrorist attack in American history, Timothy McVeigh, and 2 young men, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who staged a mass crime at Collin High School. She aspired to become one of those ruthless criminals she idolized so much, and of course decided to start her career as a criminal with a vengeance. After a while, Amanda accused Rex's father, Charlie Taylor, of being responsible for her husband's death, claiming that he had not helped Rex get rid of his addiction to pills, but had instead accustomed his son to illegal substances. And the cynicism and cold-bloodedness with which she took revenge on her father-in-law, Charlie Taylor, will send shivers down your spine. To commit her first major murder, she needed an assistant who would unconditionally agree with her actions. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to do it all by herself the first time, and she needed a willing accomplice to back her up if she got scared. And one Amanda already had, of course. It was the man in love with her, Sean Ball. The day she would take control of him was only a matter of time. Sean soon became the willing accomplice Amanda was looking for. However, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. So Sean and Amanda devised their sinister plan with military precision and put it into action. On a spring April afternoon in 2015, Amanda and Sean went to Charles Taylor's dilapidated home in nearby Ironton, Virginia, at exactly 3:27 in the afternoon, the number that marks Rex and Amanda's birth dates. Charles had to give her money to fill an Easter basket for her beloved grandchildren. They sat and talked sweetly for about 30 minutes. Then Amanda plopped down on the couch next to Charles, and it was as if a switch had been flicked in her head. Amanda's behavior changed dramatically. She violently began stabbing Charles with a knife, at which time Sean hit Charles in the head with a tire iron. Then, after stunning Charles, Amanda again deeply stabbed the knife into his chest. At this point, it was like she couldn't see anything around her from rage, and Charles just looked at her and asked, "What are you doing?" As she stabbed him, he reached out and grabbed her hair, but Amanda continued to stab him, and he continued to scream. Amanda Taylor stabbed her father-in-law Charles Taylor 31 times with a sharp bayonet knife. Every time she looked into his eyes, it was important to her that he knew she was the one who was killing him, and she wanted to feel his last breath. She wanted death for Charles to be a personal revenge. She stopped as her rage began to subside and the entire room was splattered with blood. But Amanda didn't stop there. She did something even more outrageous by taking a picture of herself next to the body and posting the picture on her social media accounts. Later that day, Amanda's mother received a disturbing phone call from an unknown number. With Amanda's voice on the other end of the line, she confessed through tears how much she loved her mom and how precious everything she had done for her, and through her tears, she shared that she had done what she had to do, and it was something very bad. Her mom sensed the situation, and it was clear to her that something terrible had happened. She begged her daughter to come home to Christiansburg, but Amanda refused the idea and stated that she and Sean were on their way to Pittsburgh. It was no secret that Amanda was on a downward spiral, and it all started with a traumatic event that occurred almost 8 months ago when her husband, Rex Taylor, who had struggled with depression and illicit substance abuse for several years, hanged himself. Authorities were subsequently shocked when they checked Amanda's social media profile. She was clearly very proud of the crime she had committed. Hoping for a quick resolution, the police issued a warrant for her arrest. However, by then, Amanda and Sean had already escaped. Amanda and Sean took a rather scenic route to escape, as if they were not on the run, but planning a wonderful vacation. They took the Blue Ridge Parkway from Virginia to North Carolina. Judging from the crime scene photos, which show the sheer brutality of the crime, the officers had great fears that the perpetrators would continue to kill. And they were right, for Amanda didn't stop there. However, Amanda was not going to go unpunished for her crimes. After carrying out her intended crimes, she planned to eventually punish herself as well. Nor did she seek to keep her deed a secret. Shortly after she went on the road with Sean Ball, she began publishing posts on social media, taking responsibility for the murder and explaining that she did it for her husband. But Amanda and Sean weren't just on the run, they were stalking their next victim. Having committed her first crime, which Amanda thought was perfect, she couldn't stop. She needed to keep killing. At a gas station, they withdrew cash, filled up the car, and proceeded to Tennessee. Sean tried to talk Amanda into stopping and just going on the run, hiding, laying low. But Amanda, having tasted blood, was determined to fulfill her desire to commit another crime, and she would come very close. They stocked up on ammunition at a sporting goods store, then stopped at a Fleabag motel in Tennessee. After spending the night in a roadside motel, they left the next day to fulfill Amanda's bloody wish. Along the way, Amanda notices 2 young girls at a rest stop on Blue Ridge Boulevard who could be her next victims. She told Sean that she was going to bring these girls in so he could shoot them. They needed money, and he agreed, so Amanda went out to lead them to the car. But when she brought them in, Sean refused to shoot them. Amanda was furious. She got back in the car and drove away. Unable to calm down, she stopped the car in the driveway and pounced on her accomplice. Sean was now in her sights. Amanda pulled a revolver out of the glove compartment, got out of the car, and walked to the passenger side where Sean sat with his eyes closed in terror. She was so beyond furious, but she spotted a random jogger right in front of her and quickly pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger. As luck would have it, Amanda missed, and the sound of the gunshot made Sean open his eyes and come to his senses.
he saw that the muzzle of the revolver was pointed at him. Amanda said that before she killed him, she wanted him to know that she was only using it for the gun and the car. She then
pulled the trigger, shooting Sean right in the face. Amanda took a picture of Sean's bloody face to post on social media and drove off, leaving him bleeding on the side of the road from the gunshot wound. Now, she was on the run alone. They had guns, firearms, they had stolen them from a relative's house, and they had already bought ammunition and magazines for the same weapon, said Police Captain New. They both seemed to be in agreement on what was going to happen, and it was going to start with the murder of Charles Taylor. Police were on the trail, and Amanda continued to post notes. In her next social media post, she revealed that she took Sean's life. While at a traffic stop in a field, Amanda took a picture of a silver revolver in her lap and posted it to Instagram with a caption. The post was more like a suicide note. "Okay, it's about that time. I'm going to find my husband in hell and finally find peace. I love you, Mom, and my beautiful children, and I know you will give them the life I could never give them. I will finally be free." The cops were actively monitoring Amanda's account in hopes of tracking her down, and they did. Surveillance video from gas stations along the route of the white SUV the perpetrators fled in also helped police get on the trail. Cell tower signals were able to locate Amanda on a North Carolina state highway. Patrol officers spotted the white SUV heading east on I-40 near Asheville when she tried to stop. No matter how much she ran, she didn't give up without a fight. Law enforcement prepared, they knew she was armed and extremely dangerous. This reality was further reinforced by another sobering social media post that surfaced later that day that said, "Okay, the time is about to come when I find my husband in hell and finally become one with him." In her photo, Amanda looks smug, like she's proud of what she's done. After a 2-mile stretch of spikes that were strategically placed in Amanda's path, eventually all the destruction and chaos was over. Amanda was taken into custody around 8 o'clock the next morning. Police officers pulled Amanda out of the car and handcuffed her. Sean was found dying on the side of the road by paramedics. In the interrogation room, Amanda acted as if she didn't care about what was happening. She was sipping a soft drink and playing with her hair before Captain Robert New and another detective walked in. When questioned, Amanda waived her right to remain silent and confessed to everything. She really did look like she felt at home. After talking to the investigators, Amanda learned that Sean wasn't dead. The bullet had gone right through his jaw, causing him to pass out from the pain, but otherwise leaving no marks on him. Then, in a blood-chilling revelation, Amanda announced that she wanted to go to the death chamber. "Do you have a choice? I would prefer just the death penalty," Amanda says in the interrogation tape. "I kill people. I deserve to die. It would be better if I just go. It would be better for my children if I could just get the death penalty and go." Then, in a stunning turn of events, Amanda found herself recanting her words and pleading not guilty in front of the court. But at the trial, Amanda did recount her crime in great detail and insisted that she had done the right thing in taking the life of old Charles, who had taken Rex from her. She said that at first she'd been very angry with Rex for doing that to her, but then she'd been more angry with his father. Amanda admitted that she wanted Charles to feel the same pain that she had felt. Her argument was that she had killed Charles because she blamed him for the death of her husband Rex, whom Charles had allegedly given illegal substances to, according to Amanda. And the moment Charles started talking about Rex again, Amanda looked at him and started stabbing him, and it became the most alive thing she had felt since Rex had died. She admitted that she was very happy in those moments when the knife entered her father-in-law. Finally, Amanda vented all of her accumulated hatred and anger. She did it to get attention, and by not pleading guilty, she got the opportunity to talk about the case, said Captain Robert New. Amanda's explanation is disgusting. After all, she compares the feeling of the crime to a happy memory. At the November 2015 trial, the jury heard how Amanda stabbed Charles 31 times, and that she aimed for his face and chest. It took the jury just 30 minutes to find Amanda Taylor guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. The judge called her the epitome of evil. As part of the plea bargain,
Sean Ball agreed to a suspended 60-year sentence after 41 years in prison. Sean admitted that he is not worthy of sympathy and is completely remorseful for what he did. But there is a guilt that he has to live with every day and wonder what caused this to happen in his life. Sean Ball was jailed for 41 years after admitting to second-degree murder as part of a plea bargain. The 60-year prison sentence was suspended, except that Ball had to serve 41 years and 1 month. Amanda recently appealed her conviction and lost. She said she plans to appeal her conviction to the Supreme Court if she has to. Obviously, Amanda didn't become a serial offender, but she gained notoriety as a killer selfie taker. Amanda Taylor made a heartbreaking confession during a phone interview for a popular show from prison. When asked about why she took selfies with her body, she said, "I was just really excited and thought I wanted to take a picture so I could post it and show everyone. It made me really happy finally." She said she has absolutely no remorse for what she did to Charles Taylor because she did exactly what she wanted to do. Amazingly, during this time, she gave a local reporter a phone interview in which she compared the thrill of being stabbed to riding a roller coaster. She said, "It was like my first roller coaster ride because of all the nerves and the feeling of freedom. That's how I felt. It wasn't what I had in mind at all. It's not what you see in the movies. It's a real animal sensation." Amanda Taylor had committed a terrible crime and wanted more. People who knew Amanda Taylor described her as a very dark and sinister woman who was obsessed with death, crime, and serial offenders from a young age. Her social media pages were filled with images of bizarre death scenes. If any woman has ever gone insane, it's Amanda Taylor, and it's so often the case that it wasn't supposed to happen. The people who loved her tried their best to stop her madness, and the people she turned to for help turned a blind eye. Now Amanda is being punished for all the destruction she was so encouraged by. This is how the career of Amanda Taylor, who dreamed of becoming a famous serial criminal, ended. Each of us goes through different phases in life, going through our own traumas and experiences. And when we look at bad heroes, learn about their past, we unwittingly try it on ourselves. Admit it. Have you ever dreamed of killing the neighbor who listens to music loudly at night or pisses you off because he parks in your spot? But reconsider the story, and better just shout by the lake or in the woods. They say it calms and returns moral balance. Truth is something that exists in reality and corresponds to the real state of affairs, but sometimes it is difficult to accept the truth, and a person creates a lie, which sincerely begins to believe and convince others. 11 young men and 1 girl met in a hotel room to celebrate the new year. Strange collaboration, you will think, and you will be right. But wait, there is one fact that will completely change your opinion. The men at this party are all members of a sexual minority, which means that 12 friends just met to have fun and celebrate the year 2021. And indeed, they celebrated the new year very cheerfully, so much so that on January 1st, the company had to take the only girl to the hospital, where doctors declared her death. But who was she? How did she die, and was anyone charged in connection with her death? But that's all in order. Next, let's break down the past party almost minute by minute. See what happened on the fateful night, and you'll definitely understand why we started this story with the notion of truth. So on December 31st, 2020, in Manila, the capital of the Philippines, at the 4-star City Garden Grand Hotel, John Paul de Lucerne checked in at 11 a.m. Christine Desera checked in later, and during the day, 9 other guys checked into room 2207 and room 2209, which were on the same floor. Hotel manager John Paul Khalili joined the merry company just after midnight. New Year's Eve night was all about fun, dancing, and alcohol, lots of alcohol. Rommel Galida woke up around 10 a.m. and noticed Christine sleeping in the bathtub. He covered her with a blanket and went back to sleep. When he woke up several hours later, he found her unconscious and beginning to turn blue. Christine was taken to the hospital by 3 friends and hotel staff, but upon arrival at the emergency room, doctors only pronounced her dead. The 11 guys with the only girl spent the entire night in the hotel room, and she was dead by morning. News headlines about the crime shocked the public, Everyone imagined the story the same way, because it was obvious what a group of young guys and one girl could do all night. But what really happened that New Year's Eve night, and from what Christine Desera died, was to be solved by the investigation. Christine Angelica Desera was born on April 13, 1997, into the well-to-do family of John Nestor Desera and Sharon Rose Faba Desera, and grew up in Barangay San Isidro, General Santos City. She grew up an outgoing, intelligent, and independent girl. Kristen was a loving sister to her three siblings, Monica, Chloe, and JJ. After graduating from high school, she moved to the larger and more promising city of Davao, on the shores of the bay of the same name. There she enrolled in university. Christine studied diligently, danced, modeled, and was active on social media. Christine was also the epitome of beauty and intelligence. In 2017, she graduated with honors from the University of the Philippines Mindanao in Davao City, where she earned a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Arts with a major in Media Arts. The girl has been actively involved in modeling and theatrical performances. On August 5, 2017, she competed against 8 other contenders for the title of Miss Silva Davao 2017 at the New City Commercial Corporation Mall in Davao City. She came in second place. In June 2018, she participated in the annual fashion show. From September 2017 to January 2019, she worked as a marketing consultant for Gaisano Malls in different parts of Mindanao, including Davao City, General Santos City, Tagum, Toril, and Digos. Christine's life has been colorful and fulfilling. In February 2019, her life's dream came true. She moved to Manila to start working as a flight attendant for PAL Express, a subsidiary of Philippine Airlines. Christine Desera's last flight as a flight attendant was on December 28, 2020. Christine's death was immediately publicized, due to which numerous discussions and theories were formed in the community. Initially, the police suspected that Kristen was most likely abused and killed by a group of guys she was partying with on New Year's Eve. Even without autopsy results and a toxicology report, Makati City Police filed preliminary charges of assault and murder against 11 men. The Philippine National Police declared the case closed. Arrests were made with charges and identification of suspects. 3 of the party participants were detained after surrendering to authorities on their own. But the main answer to what really caused Christine's death was the forensic medical report. The autopsy of Christine's body was conducted in Pasay City at the Rizal Funeral Home under the direction of Forensic Medical Officer Police Major Michael Nick Sartiento. On January 3, 2021, the examination of Christine Desera's body was completed and a forensic report was issued which found that death was due to natural causes due to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. However, it also mentioned bruises on the girl's right arm, right thigh, knees, ankles, and right foot, as well as a linear abrasion on her right thigh. Deeply healed lacerations and abrasions were also reported during the genital exam. The National Capital Region Police Department announced that a special investigation team had been set up to look into the case, but Christine's family was unwilling to accept the fact that a young, vibrant girl could die a natural death prematurely. At a press conference on January 5th, 2021, Christine Desera's family stated that they had seen the autopsy report that said she died of an aneurysm. However, they stated that the autopsy performed was incomplete and requested a second autopsy. The parents of the deceased have been trying to understand how Christine's aorta was ruptured. After all, the police and the Desera family lawyer believed that the aneurysm was the result of assault or abuse, which means it was not a natural death, and the perpetrators should be punished. The prosecutor's office identified all of the 11 men who were with Christine throughout the night. Some of them were her co-workers. Other young men were friends of her friends whom Christine was meeting for the first time. It turned out that Christine was the initiator of this party. She had booked the hotel room herself a few days in advance and coordinated this party with her friends. Her mom, Sharon, was aware of her daughter's friendship with men and never opposed it. Since childhood, Kristen had found it easier to socialize and make friends with the male gender, so it was considered normal in their family.
In addition, she and her friends usually did not go home for vacations, so it became a tradition for them to meet each other every year. Kristen was able to call her family just after midnight to inform them of the ongoing celebration at the Makati Hotel and to wish her family a happy new year. During the video call, the family could see Kristen's friends and the surrounding festive environment. However, there has been new speculation about the abuse allegation, so in the case, the main evidence of the incident became the frames of the video from the hotel lobby, the study of which helped the police almost minute by minute to reconstruct the picture of what happened. It should be noted that the party was to be held in room 2209. It was this room and booked Christine Desera. The main events begin to unfold in the late afternoon. At 11:21 p.m., Christine leaves room 2209 and goes to room 2207. At 11:38 p.m., the company returns to their room. Christine goes last. She is holding her shoes in a glass. At 2:50 a.m., Christine, holding the hand of a new acquaintance, Valentine, goes to room 2207. While they are at a neighbor's house, a hotel employee brings an extra mattress to room 2209. At 2:52 a.m., Valentine accompanies Christine to her room. Valentine's gait shows that the girl is already quite drunk. Her gait is too relaxed, and she is holding a bottle in her hand. The friends stop at the door, and Christine suddenly kisses Valentine, but the man quickly pulls away, after which the couple goes inside. At 3:15 a.m., Christine hurriedly leaves her room and goes to her neighbor's room, and 6 minutes later, one of the guys leaves there. He heads to room 2209, presumably to call his friends. At 3:22 a.m., Christine Desera can be seen chatting with another man in the next room on the right side of the hallway, while two other men walk past them. She looked upset. Suddenly, Christine hugs one of her friends, and then they disappear from the view of the cameras altogether. At 4:13 a.m., John de Lucerne can be seen carrying Christine back to the first room. At 4:22 a.m., the camera again captures Christine at the door of room 2207. It's unclear what brought her there again. She practically falls off her feet, and a guy who looks like John de Lucerne picks her up by the waist and carries her to room 2209. Christine looks pretty drunk. At 5:05 a.m., the camera captures Christine laughing as she runs away from a guy who looks like Louis de Lima. Afterward, they're standing outside room 2207. Christine looks normal, and with him she enters room 2209. At 6:23 a.m., Christine makes her last appearance on camera alive. For the last time, Valentine carries her in his arms from room 2207. The girl is conscious. It was obviously an eventful night, but the most important truth still remains behind the scenes. The party continued until dawn. Around 12 noon, when Christine was found unconscious in the bathtub, her friends carried her to the floor and repeatedly attempted cardiopulmonary resuscitation. After unsuccessful attempts, they called for help at the front desk. A few minutes later, the hotel manager and the head of security arrived in the room. They used a wheelchair to lower Christine to the first floor of the hotel. Ronald Galido accompanied Christine to the hospital. The doctors, unfortunately, only stated the girl's death. Rommel called Christine's mom and broke the bad news. It can be assumed that what is happening really looks like a fun party, and definitely to be in one room such a large company was cramped, so young people chaotically moved all night from room to room. But the investigators had suspicions about the use of illegal substances to enhance the effect of alcohol. When questioned, some of the detainees claimed that there were no illegal substances during the party, but only whiskey and tequila. It is worth noting that illegal drugs were initially the centerpiece of the investigation, as the testimony of one of the detainees reported that Christine had doubts about the contents of the drinks and suggested that someone may have spiked it with an unknown substance. It transpired that guests were asked to bring their own food and drinks. Because of this, there was speculation that Christine Desera's drink was poisoned and could have triggered the aneurysm that eventually led to her death.
but the autopsy report stated that no alcohol or illegal drugs taken the night before her death would cause this type of aortic dilatation or defect. Substance information was later unconfirmed, as no illegal substances or traces of them were found in the room or in the suspect's personal belongings. An examination and search of the two rooms, as well as the neighboring room 2009, looking for potential evidence, did not yield the desired results that at least indirectly proved the violent death of Christine Desera. Under questioning, Mark Rosales and John de la Serna publicly admitted their unconventional orientation and stated that Christine was their best friend and they would never hurt her. John also revealed that they had to bring Christine back from room 2207 because she was already vomiting early in the morning. Rommel Galido said that around 10 a.m. he found Christine in the bathtub of their room and thought she was asleep, so he just covered her with a blanket. However, around noon, after he woke up and went back to wake her up, he realized the girl was blue and not breathing. He rushed to his friends for help. The hotel advised that she be rushed to Makati Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead on arrival, reportedly due to a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The hospital reported the death to the Makati City Police. Meanwhile, other men from a neighboring hotel room had left by then. On January 4th, the Philippine National Police sent a separate statement to the media about the Christine Desera incident, saying that the case is almost solved despite some missing details and conflicting reports on the matter.
Police Chief Debold Sinas said they already have 3 suspects and they have been apprehended. Other suspects were being sought, but as early as January 6th, the Makati City Prosecutor's Office ordered the release of the 3 men who were in custody due to lack of evidence. Prosecutors insisted that the evidence presented was insufficient to establish that Christine was abused. They also said that even if Christine Desera was abused, the police have yet to prove that this is what caused her death. Moreover, the party was a gathering of men of non-traditional orientation where they were all flirting with each other, and Christine was an extra woman. Rommel Galido, as well as most of those present at the party, were stewards and co-workers of Christine Desera at PL Airlines, indicating that she was well acquainted with these men and their orientation. On January 13, 2021, the Makati City Prosecutor's Office launched a preliminary investigation and based on an official autopsy that confirmed that the 23-year-old died from a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The prosecutor's office also called on the police to release the results of the victim's DNA analysis, toxicology report, and histopathic study. However, Christine's mother, Sharon Desera, criticized the report that her daughter was not abused. She appeared on a news show where she claimed that her daughter was abused by a group of guys. If you see Christine's body, if you're a mother, you'll probably feel the pain that Christine suffered because of them, but my daughter can't talk anymore because she's dead. The woman spoke out on the TV program. Sharon cited the lacerations and bruises on her daughter's body, which were not recorded in the autopsy, as evidence that the report was inaccurate. Christine's family later said they wanted another autopsy to challenge authorities' initial findings that she died a natural death. The basis was injuries and bruising that were not documented in the first report. Family spokesperson Brick Reyes said that the injuries on the victim's legs and arms, as well as her remains, would provide sufficient evidence that Christine was abused. Rick Reyes also said that they believed the young woman was drugged and abused before she died. Christine was already intoxicated and complained that something seemed to have been spiked in her drink during the New Year's Eve celebration. Christine's parents said they have filed a complaint demanding the immediate dismissal of Michael Nick Sarmiento for gross negligence and gross incompetence in preparing Christine's forensic report and death certificate. Dr. Marisi Ramos, a friend of Dasser's family, told reporters that the body was subjected to a second autopsy. He also emphasized that the biological fluids recovered from the second autopsy had been forwarded to the Death Investigation Unit, which will provide more details after a final evaluation and consolidation of all the findings of its forensic team. The pathology autopsy results from the Southern Police District Crime Lab Division's forensic report, which was eventually shared on social media, showed that the cause of death was consistent with what was previously reported as a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The official autopsy revealed that Christina was not abused on the night of her death. The actual cause of Desera's death lies in the aorta. The constant increase in blood pressure in the aorta caused the defect to weaken, and eventually the aorta ruptured, the Philippine National Police Crime Lab report said. At the time the aorta rupture occurred, there was blood loss, so Christine felt various symptoms such as weakness, nausea, and sweating. The blood loss due to the aortic rupture killed her within a few hours, the report said. This means that the girl had a ruptured aortic aneurysm, which enlarged the lower part of the main vessel, aorta, that supplies blood to the entire body. This vessel runs from a person's heart through the chest and abdomen. Since the aorta is the largest vessel in the body, if it ruptures, a person can lose a huge amount of blood and potentially be fatal, as in this case. In addition, it was noted that Christine's aneurysm did not occur recently. It started a long time ago. The report states that dilatation is a chronic condition and was present long before her death.
Had she not died that fateful night, she would still have died in any scenario that would cause her blood pressure to rise enough to rupture the aneurysm. The autopsy also revealed that Desera's heart was enlarged compared to a healthy heart, further confirming Christina Desera's undiagnosed hypertension. For the most part, it can be confirmed that the girl's death was due to natural causes. But the widespread misinformation brought shame and persecution to those 11 young guys who were at the party and sincerely tried to give Christine first aid, but they were labeled as criminals. All 11 guys who were charged preliminarily have since been released from custody. The Makati City Prosecutor's Office tried to rectify the situation and said that at the time of the publicity, the evidence presented was not enough to establish that Christine Desera was abused, and it was impossible to obtain proper evidence at that time. Therefore, they had to build a version based on signs of deterioration of the victim's body. In addition, 2 other suspects said that the police forced them to give false testimony that there were illegal drugs at the New Year's Eve party. Another participant in the story explained his kiss with Christine, which was captured by surveillance cameras on the eve of her death. According to the man, it was Christine herself who initiated it. He, however, tried to push her away. Law enforcement officials were criticized for not conducting a thorough toxicological examination when the flight attendant's body was found. The charges against the men were later dropped due to lack of evidence. The death of Christine Desera attracted widespread media attention as a result of suspicious circumstances that seemed to contradict the findings of the Philippine National Police. Christine's case continued to receive a lot of publicity online as further developments came from her family, who in no way could accept the truth and believe in the natural death of their daughter. The girl's mother, Sharon, appealed to President Rodrigo Duterte for help in seeking justice for her daughter. I am an ordinary person. You also have a daughter. I want to speak out openly because I don't want anyone to be victimized by the kind of cruelty and barbarism like my Christine. Christine Desera was buried at Forest Lake Memorial Park in her hometown of General Santos, more than a week after her death. A wave of condolences, reposts, and farewells traveled across the social stanzas of Kristen's friends and co-workers. Ultimately, the unconventional case of Christine Desera serves as a prime example of when the media spreads misinformation and how it can affect the public as well as impact those involved. As we come to the end, the story wants to return to the truth, which sooner or later, but in any form, is bound to take its place of honor. After all, the truth is one. But Christine's family is still convinced that the girl was killed by these people and that there is something secret in this story. Personally, I do not understand and found no answers to the question about bruises and wounds on Christine's body. Why was it hushed up? It seems that despite the presence of wounds and bruises on Christine's body, the cause of her death was not them, but the rupture of the aorta due to heart disease, so they did not focus on the wounds on her body. In my opinion, There are a lot of oddities and inconsistencies in this case, but you guys are the judge. I would like to wish Christine's family to accept the irreparable loss, because young guys, whether they are guilty or not, will end up remembering the same sad story every New Year's Eve and making excuses for the rest of their lives. People who have lived in the same place for a long time without moving generally know their neighbors well. They understand whom to trust and to what extent, and whom it's better to stay away from. Sometimes, neighbors, living side by side for years, become closer than some family members. They are asked to look after the house and property while the family is away on vacation or traveling. They invite each other over, and without a second thought, allow their children to accept treats from these individuals. However, sometimes the person who has lived next door for many years can turn out to be a real maniac who has just been waiting for the right moment. The case of Diana Garnica became one of the most sensational in Argentina in recent years. A lot of effort and time went into the investigation, and the criminal could have escaped punishment, as there was almost no direct evidence against him. He did not admit his guilt, and the victim's body was never found. Who was Diana Garnica? Family, early years. Diana Abigail Garnica Cisneros was born on March 30th, 2000, in the province of Tucumán, in the town of Villa Mariano Moreno El Colmenar, Argentina. She grew up in a poor, large family where she was the youngest daughter and the seventh, second-to-last child of her parents. Her parents, Ramon Garnica and Elizabeth Susana Cisneros, worked hard to provide for their many children and create at least somewhat comfortable living conditions for them. As the youngest girl in the family, Diana was everyone's favorite. Her parents adored her, and her older brothers and sisters took care of her. She did well in school, was talented in drawing, and from a young age, loved to dance. She was unusually intelligent and sensible for her age, never lied to her family, had no secrets from her mother and father, and was very close to her older sister Sonia, who essentially took care of her upbringing while their parents were at work. Since the Garnica family was quite religious, the parents, along with their children, regularly attended church and tried to live honestly and correctly. The older children also began working from their teenage years to help their parents somewhat. The younger ones kept the house in order and each had their responsibilities, which they were accountable for. Diana dreamed of becoming a doctor in the future because she always aimed to help those around her, was very kind, sensitive, and responsive. She hoped to build a successful career, help her family, and said that she would buy her parents a big house where her mom could plant a garden with flowers and fruit trees that she always dreamed of. Unfortunately, these dreams were never to be realized. Moving to a new city, parents' divorce. In 2013, after Ramon lost his job due to worsening financial troubles, the family was forced to move to Juan Bautista Alberti, located in the same province of Tucumán. The move was extremely difficult for them, and initially their problems only increased. The relationship between the spouses, who had been together for over 2 decades, quickly deteriorated. They began to argue constantly and eventually decided that they could no longer stay together. The divorce was a severe shock for all the children, but the younger ones felt it most acutely. Diana, upon learning what had happened, was simply devastated. The world of a 13-year-old girl crumbled in an instant, and she simply could not understand what would happen next. Despite the separation, the father continued to support his ex-wife and children, but he soon started another family. Elizabeth also struggled greatly with the divorce, but her children supported her, and she was fortunate to find a decent job with a reasonable salary for that area. Gradually, the family adapted to their new reality, settled into their new home, made friends, and established good relationships with nearby residents. Across from the Garnica family lived a certain Dario Javier Suarez. He was a very pleasant, friendly, and kind 36-year-old man. He lived with his wife, Yasmina Alejandra Villarreal, with whom he was raising 4 children. He also had 2 children from previous relationships and 1 child out of wedlock. It's noteworthy that Dario and his family moved to Juan Bautista Alberti just 6 months before the Garnicas settled there. Perhaps that's why they quickly became close friends, as they were newcomers to the area. Previously, Suarez had lived in the province of Santiago del Estero, in the northern part of Argentina. Dario, along with his wife, 2 brothers, and some other relatives, worked at a local brick factory located just a mile from their home. His children were about the same age as Diana and her siblings. They attended the same school, quickly found common ground, and became friends. The adults also got along well, allowing their children to visit each other, even staying overnight, celebrated family events together, and became almost like family. Sonia and Diana even babysat the youngest neighbor's children while their parents were at work. First, Job and teenage romance. After the divorce, Ramon did what he could to help his ex-wife and older children, but after he started a new family, he nearly stopped sending money. The mother's job, although it provided a stable income, was disastrously insufficient for a large family. The family even started a small business making and selling homemade baked goods, but it quickly failed. The situation became so dire that in her upper school years, Diana had to drop out of school to start working and help her mother. The 16-year-old girl took a job as a caregiver, looking after an elderly ill person. Since she wanted to become a doctor in the future, Garnica thought this experience would be beneficial. Despite her young age, she approached her job with full seriousness and responsibility. She precisely followed all instructions, monitored the medication schedule, performed necessary hygiene procedures, and cooked diet-specific meals, adhering to recommendations developed by the treating doctor. Diana liked her job. She felt needed and useful, strived to do everything right, and was highly valued for it. She worked nearly every day from morning to evening, but still faithfully attended church on Sundays with her mother and sisters. She also entered into a romantic relationship with a boy they had previously gone to school with. Sometimes, in the evenings, the young couple walked in the park, simply talking and enjoying each other's company. Nevertheless, Diana adhered to the strict rules and schedule set by her mother. She always returned home by 10 o'clock in the evening, did not stay out at night, and never went anywhere without informing her family where and with whom she would be and when she would return. Sometimes, she went to the city market with the neighbors and their children to buy necessities, but her mother always knew about such trips. Dario treated the neighbor's girl like his own daughter, took care of her, and even occasionally spoiled her with small gifts. When the man learned that she had a boyfriend, he paternalistically gave her advice about how boys could be deceitful and warned her not to let him deceive her or take advantage of her naivety and innocence. The girl shared this conversation with her mother, from whom she still had no secrets. Elizabeth found the neighbor's behavior somewhat strange, but she decided that it was his way of showing care, as he also had teenage daughters the same age as Diana, a strange request. On May 6, 2017, in the late afternoon, Diana unexpectedly received a call from her neighbor, who expressed a desire to help her family out of the goodness of his heart. At that time, Garnica was indeed in desperate need of money, but she was expecting a bonus soon, which she planned to spend on getting a dental prosthesis for her mom and starting repairs on their home's roof, which had started leaking after a recent rainstorm. However, Dario suddenly mentioned that he wanted to buy an air conditioner for Elizabeth as a gift, and asked Diana to accompany him to help choose the right one. He insisted that Diana should not tell her mother about it because he wanted it to be a surprise, which wouldn't be possible if she knew. He set up a meeting place and once again extracted a promise from her that she would tell no one. At the moment she received this odd call, Diana was just returning home from work. The neighbor urged her to go with him right away, but she said she needed to drop off groceries she'd bought on the way home and change her clothes. Upon arriving home, she naturally told her mother everything, as she never lied or kept secrets from her. The woman found it odd too. Although they were on good terms with the neighbors, they had never done anything like this before. Elizabeth wanted to call Dario herself to thank him and decline the gift, as an air conditioner was not a necessity for their family. However, her daughter convinced her not to do so, saying she would go to the store as promised, but would decline the expensive purchase. The girl reassured her mother that everything would be fine and that she would return home not too late. At that moment, the neighbor sent a text message to Diana's phone, stating he was already waiting for her, and again requested that she tell no one about their meeting to keep the surprise. Diana replied that she was on her way out, but then noticed that her phone was almost dead. She decided to leave it at home to charge. She met Dario at the agreed place, and that was the last time anyone saw her. A mysterious disappearance. When her daughter hadn't returned home by the evening, Elizabeth grew worried, especially since she couldn't call her because the phone was left at home. The woman waited a little longer, but as it grew dark, she started to panic. She first called her eldest daughter, Sonia, and told her everything, but she tried to reassure her mother, assuring her that her sister would return home soon and that nothing bad could have happened. As it got completely dark, the mother heard the sound of the neighbor's motorcycle, which pulled up to the house across the street. She thought Dario and her daughter had returned, so she breathed a sigh of relief. However, 5, 10, 20 minutes passed, and the girl still hadn't entered the house. Then the woman went outside and saw that the neighbor was alone. She approached him and asked about Diana, but he seemed surprised and said he didn't know anything about her and hadn't seen her that day. Elizabeth was stunned. She didn't know what to think and couldn't understand whether the neighbor was lying or if her daughter had deceived her for the first time in her life and gone somewhere else. However, the man insisted on his story and even handed her his phone to confirm he hadn't contacted her daughter. Naturally, by that time, he had already deleted all calls and messages. Dario also expressed concern about the girl's whereabouts and even offered to drive around the neighborhood with her mother to look for her and ask neighbors and the teenager's friends if they had seen anything suspicious. However, the woman declined his help, deciding to start the search herself with her older children. They walked around the neighborhood until late at night, questioning everyone they met along the way and calling all of the girl's friends and acquaintances, but no one had seen her that day. Returning home, Elizabeth decided to check her daughter's phone and saw 2 missed calls and a message from the neighbor, as her daughter had not deleted them. Fully convinced that Dario was lying, the woman decided to go to the police and also called her ex-husband to inform him that their youngest daughter had vanished without a trace. The man lived several hundred miles from his ex-wife's home, but upon hearing the alarming news, he immediately drove to her to help search for their daughter. Police indifference and the horrific scene at the brick factory. When a worried woman arrived at the police station in the middle of the night with a report of her daughter's disappearance, the officers did not take the matter seriously. They assumed that the girl had probably run off with her boyfriend or gone to a party with friends and would return home by morning. Elizabeth shared her suspicions about the neighbor and even showed the calls and messages on her daughter's phone. But the officers dismissed her concerns, saying they would not start a search until at least 24 hours had passed. Realizing they could only rely on themselves, the Garnica family organized a massive search effort. By that time, the father had already arrived from another city, and together they went to the neighbor's house to have a serious talk. However, the house was empty, dark, and quiet, and no one responded to their knocks. The family then went to the brick factory where the neighbor worked with his relatives, and there, the relatives of the missing girl made a dreadful discovery. Since Dario was the senior member of his crew, he had keys to the factory and could access it even when it was closed. That night, the lights were on, and when the girl's relatives entered, they encountered a horrifying scene. The brick-making furnaces were on, though it was a day off and the factory was supposed to be closed. Moreover, all the adult members of the neighbor's family were present. They appeared agitated and were clearly in the process of burning something in the furnaces. The Garnicas were struck by a terrible suspicion. Dario was not in the factory, and when they asked his relatives where he was and what was happening, those present tried to deflect, saying they were preparing equipment for operation and conducting maintenance, and mentioned that the man had just been there and might have stepped out to the restroom. However, within the few minutes that this conversation lasted, the suspect managed to leave the factory through the back door, secretly escaping. Search for evidence and arrest of suspects. After the frightening scene at the factory and the strange behavior of Dario's relatives, the missing girl's family decided to contact the prosecutor's office. By that time, almost 24 hours had passed since the teenager's disappearance, and the investigation was supposed to begin. However, it turned out that no information from the police station where the parents had reported the girl's disappearance had reached them. This situation outraged and angered prosecutor Claudio Banari, who took the case under his personal control and promised to punish the police officers who had neglected their duties. His first action was to request a warrant to search Dario's home and the brick factory. However, since it was Sunday and the judicial system was unavailable, the prosecutor, not wanting to waste precious time, decided to organize everything under his own responsibility. Banari suspected that the suspect might have attacked the teenager, assaulted her, and then ended her life, asking his relatives for help to dispose of the body and evidence. He found it suspicious that Dario's entire family was in the factory on their day off in the middle of the night and had inexplicably started the furnaces. The calls and messages from the man to his young neighbor's phone also appeared suspicious. As the family searched for the girl, including through social media, the case quickly received wide publicity, leading to various speculations and guesses. For instance, a theory widely circulated that the young beauty could have been kidnapped to be sold into slavery in a brothel or for organs. One woman even accused a specific person, although it later turned out she was just trying to settle scores with an ex-boyfriend and send him to prison. The search of the suspect's house yielded no results. Obviously, he had not brought the girl there, and the crime had occurred elsewhere. No traces were found at the brick factory either. But Banari did not rule out that the furnaces could have been used as a crematorium to destroy the body and evidence. However, these were only guesses and hypotheses. Nevertheless, the prosecutor initiated the arrest of Dario, using the data from the missing girl's phone as a key argument. His brothers Cesar and Marcus, his wife, sister, mother-in-law, and some other relatives were also arrested as possible accomplices. During interrogation, the suspect denied all charges against him, claiming he had not seen the neighbor and had not communicated with her that day. However, based on data analysis from his phone, as well as gadgets belonging to his relatives and the victim, clear discrepancies in their statements were identified. The man was charged with unlawful detainment, possible assault, and depriving the girl of her life, while his relatives were accused of criminal conspiracy and complicity. All suspects were sent to jail for 3 months during the investigation. The search for Diana. Despite the police's initial disbelief that the missing girl would be found alive, her parents continued to hope for the best. They involved an increasing number of people in the search, organized marches and rallies, engaged the media in the investigation, and demanded that Dario confess where their daughter was and what he had done to her. In desperation, the parents sought audiences with the then ministers of security and justice to influence the investigation and pressure the suspect into making a statement. Although the missing girl's relatives were received by the highest state structures, unfortunately, this did not reflect in practice. Over 200 police officers were involved in the search, as well as service dogs and special equipment including helicopters and search drones, but there were still no results. Alarming discoveries. At a brick factory in one of the kilns during a second inspection, a strange, severely melted metal object was found, along with a tooth fragment. It was suspected that this object was the piercing the missing girl wore in her nose. However, special forensic analysis was required to confirm this, and it would take time. While law enforcement awaited the results, another more thorough search was conducted at Dario's house, where notebooks belonging to the man were found containing quite suspicious notes. These appeared to be sort of personal diaries, from which it was revealed that the man was literally obsessed with his young neighbor. Everything started when the family moved in next door to his house. At that time, she was only 13 years old. The suspect did not write anything specific about what he wanted to do with the girl, but the notes made it clear that she drove him mad. He thought about her every day for years and periodically wrote letters addressed to the neighbor, in which he confessed his love in a peculiar form. After studying all the notes, investigators concluded that the man's obsession only grew over time, and he could no longer control his vile desires. In one of the last letters, he addressed the girl with words implying that she would eventually belong to him, and he would grant her eternal peace and tranquility. This entry looked like a direct threat, indicating that Dario might indeed have taken advantage of her and then dealt with her. The disappearance of physical evidence. It seemed that based solely on the entries from the diaries, the case could be brought to court, but the results of the forensic analysis were still pending. When Benari tried to find out the reason for the delay, it turned out that the evidence had simply disappeared. It was impossible to conduct a DNA analysis of the tooth fragment to determine if it belonged to the missing girl or to establish what the strange metal object was. Subsequently, the prosecutor decided to classify information about the investigation's progress, and the police officers responsible for preserving the evidence were immediately fired and also detained for criminal negligence and possible assistance to the suspects. The investigation itself, after this egregious incident, came under the direct control of federal authorities. Moreover, it soon emerged that part of the records found in the suspect's home had also disappeared. Among these was the last letter in which he promised to grant the girl eternal rest. Without these pieces of evidence, the case could simply fall apart, and the criminal and his accomplices might escape punishment. However, no measures helped determine where the physical evidence had vanished to. 3 months later, the detention period for the suspects expired, but bringing the case to court without key evidence was risky and evidently threatened a loss. What remained were data from the girl's phone and testimony from a random witness who saw the suspect and the missing girl walking together on the street on the day she disappeared. Dario's lawyer demanded that the entire investigation be declared invalid and his client be immediately released, as well as the search results annulled since they were conducted without a special warrant. The court only partially granted the defense's request. The main suspect remained in custody, but all his relatives were released, as nothing specific could be charged against them. However, in May 2019, 2 years after the girl's disappearance, Dario was also released. Over that time, the investigation had not progressed. No new evidence had emerged, and the body had not been found. The long-awaited trial and verdict. Although the main suspect was set free, the case was not closed, and the investigation continued. Occasionally, evidence and testimonies emerged suggesting Diana might still be alive. For instance, a banknote was found with a plea for help allegedly written by the girl. However, handwriting analysis established that the writing did not belong to the missing girl. Only in June 2021, more than 4 years after the girl's disappearance, Prosecutor Benari finally managed to bring this challenging case to court. But the process was constantly delayed due to the global pandemic raging worldwide, and the Garnica family felt increasingly disheartened. The relatives no longer hoped for a favorable outcome, or that the guilty would face deserved punishment. The trial only began in April 2023, 6 years after the crime was committed, with the culprit finally appearing in court. By that time, the missing entries from Dario's diaries, which everyone believed were lost forever, had been found. These became the key pieces of evidence proving the man's guilt. However, additional expert analysis was required to verify the authenticity of these documents. In addition to this, 2 new witnesses appeared in the case. One was Dario's former lover, who claimed he had seduced her when she was still a teenager. She also asserted that the suspect always had a weakness for young girls, and she was far from the only one he had treated this way. The second witness was a neighbor of Caesar, Dario's brother and probable accomplice. According to him, on the night of the girl's disappearance, the brothers arrived together on a motorcycle with a strange large bundle in the sidecar, took some tools from a shed, and then left together. The witness had remained silent for so long because he feared Caesar could harm his family, as he was always volatile and aggressive. The defendant never admitted his guilt, claiming he would never harm the neighboring girl, to whom he felt as though she were his daughter. Nonetheless, the few pieces of evidence were sufficient to render a guilty verdict. The body of the missing girl was never found, and the events of that fateful day were painstakingly reconstructed, establishing that the man lured took advantage of the teenager and then ended her life and disposed of the remains, likely with the help of his relatives. On May 2nd, 2023, Dario was found guilty of the abduction, taking advantage of and ending the life of Diana. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The insane courier of death. How quickly would you open your door if a stranger knocked? Would you inquire about their identity and purpose before unlocking? Most people would, as a reasonable precaution. However, if a courier in a uniform with a package in hand stood on your doorstep, would you still ask questions or would you open right away? Typically, couriers do not arouse suspicion or concern, and people tend to let them in, even when they aren't expecting any delivery. In the summer of 2020, amid the pandemic and total lockdown, when couriers became almost the sole link between people and the outside world, delivering everything from food and essential medicines to work documents, one such delivery person was bringing death to homes. A masked man with a pistol seemed elusive, and it was unclear who his next visit would target. The police, without any leads, were afraid to spread panic. But soon the case took a completely unexpected turn. A fatal incident involving a well-known lawyer. This convoluted story, as it later turned out, had begun many years ago, but its tragic development occurred on July 11th, 2020, in a prestigious cottage area southeast of Los Angeles. There, in one of the elite houses, renowned lawyer Mark Angelucci was waiting out the pandemic, isolated in his spacious mountain estate. Like many others, he continued to work remotely, hoping for the situation in the country and the world to improve. On that day, the 52-year-old homeowner wasn't expecting any visitors or deliveries, but when a courier in FedEx Corporation uniform rang his doorbell with a package in hand, the man, without hesitation, opened the door. The lawyer probably thought that one of his partners or clients had sent some important documents, forgetting to inform him. Nothing indicated trouble, and the person on the doorstep did not seem alarming or suspicious. The courier, appropriately wearing a special protective mask and gloves for that period, had a parcel and an invoice that required a signature. However, as soon as the lawyer was about to receive the package, the delivery person suddenly drew a pistol and fired several shots at close range, aiming for vital organs to ensure the lawyer would be fatally injured. The lawyer had no chance to react, and being unarmed in his home robe, he had no chance of survival. After the deed, the courier simply left the scene, leaving the victim bleeding out on the floor. Since the house was in a rather secluded location, none of the neighbors noticed anything unusual, though sounds resembling shots did prompt them to call emergency services and report the disturbing incident. No leads at all. Mark Angelucci succumbed to his injuries at the scene, and the arriving medics and law enforcement could only confirm he was dead. Upon examining the crime scene, detectives immediately dismissed the notion that robbery was the criminal's motive. The house was truly luxurious, adorned with antique items containing a safe and visibly expensive possessions, yet everything remained untouched. In the lawyer's home office lay a mass of important documents concerning various cases, but these too did not interest the perpetrator. Everything in the house was left undisturbed, nothing was searched or moved, and the criminal did not even cross the threshold of the home. Thus, from the very beginning, the main objective was clearly to eliminate the homeowner. The criminal was caught on several outdoor surveillance cameras, but as he was wearing a company cap from FedEx and a medical mask, it was virtually impossible to discern any distinctive features. All that could be determined was that he was a white male, of average height and slender build. The criminal wore gloves, thus leaving no fingerprints anywhere. Essentially, the only evidence consisted of bullets extracted from the deceased's body. The police were baffled, and initially they decided to investigate the people closest to the lawyer, to understand who might wish him harm and who might benefit from his death. The possibility that the crime was related to his professional activities was also not ruled out. Therefore, it was also necessary to examine which cases the lawyer had been handling recently, whether he had any dissatisfied clients, and whether he had conflicts with any colleagues. There was a vast amount of work to be done, and determining a priority direction seemed impossible at the moment. So they decided to start with the relatives and close friends of the lawyer. Rich, successful, and utterly alone. It soon emerged that Mark was profoundly lonely. No, he had quite a few friends, got along well with colleagues and neighbors, but he had no truly close or familial relationships. His parents had long passed away, Angelucci had no siblings, and he never started his own family. In his youth, the man diligently studied, then he tirelessly built a career in legal practice, where he achieved great heights and recognition. But he intentionally decided to sacrifice his personal life, so at 52, he had never been married and had no heirs. Mark was quite attractive, intelligent, eloquent, always dressed expensively and stylishly, lived in a luxurious home, and drove a luxury car. He was rich and successful, and wherever this man appeared, he literally drew the attention of women, but he did not engage in romances or intrigues, and in principle, always kept his personal life hidden from everyone. This led to many rumors about his orientation, but the lawyer himself never confirmed nor denied them. In his list of contacts, they found a woman named Cassie J., with whom the deceased was very close. Their relationship was not romantic, but rather akin to brotherly sisterly love. She was a journalist and had met the lawyer many years ago while preparing a report on a high-profile case he was handling. The man willingly agreed to help her. They quickly found common ground, got along well, and continued to communicate after their joint work ended. For Cassie, the news of the death of her close friend was a real shock. She described Mark as sincere, kind, and responsive, with an easygoing and cheerful nature, who was involved in charity and always responded to others' troubles. According to her, he had no enemies, at least she was unaware of their existence. But in recent years, he had been among the top lawyers in California and had not lost a single case, so he undoubtedly made some adversaries whom he might not even suspect. The anti-feminist and men's rights advocate. During the investigation, a rather intriguing detail emerged. It was discovered that the lawyer held anti-feminist views, but also supported traditional notions of men and women in family and society without harboring any animosity towards women. He opposed discrimination against men in matters such as child custody, which almost always tend to favor women. Angelucci was a fighter for justice, not male supremacy. He took on some complex cases completely free of charge, helping those who found themselves in trouble. The lawyer noted that with the rise of feminist organization activity, men were almost always presumed guilty from the start in any conflict and doomed to defeat, with no chance to prove their innocence. Over the years, Mark became an activist for men's rights, although in fact, he simply sought to equalize rights for all people, ensuring that everyone could expect a fair judicial resolution in conflict situations regardless of gender. Given this, it was not possible to exclude the likelihood that radically minded representatives of feminist organizations could have been involved in the lawyer's demise, as the deceased had no family or close people, and there were no leads or clues in the case. The investigation could have stalled and eventually been archived. In response, Cassie J. decided to take initiative. Using her extensive connections in the media, the journalist brought widespread attention to the case, prompting law enforcement to conduct a more thorough investigation. Detectives carefully reviewed the case files that the lawyer had been handling recently, hoping to find any hints. The task was daunting, but before they could find anything, the Courier criminal struck again. Collateral victims, or was the entire family targeted? On July 19, 2020, just a week after the first crime, on the other side of the country in New Jersey, an armed courier paid a visit to the luxurious home of a state federal judge. That day, none of the family members were expecting any deliveries or packages, and they were all self-isolating. Both parents, being lawyers, continued to work remotely, and their college student son was on holiday. The head of the family, a 62-year-old lawyer named Mike Anderl first noticed the approaching courier while he was on the second-floor balcony of his home. He thought that perhaps some work-related documents awaited his wife and hurried downstairs to open the door. However, his son, who was closer to the front door, opened it without a second thought. They exchanged just a few words before a shot rang out. Mike was descending the stairs at that time, and likely he was the initial target, but his 20-year-old son, Daniel, literally stood between his father and the criminal. The young man took a bullet to the chest, fell to the floor, and the criminal opened fire on the lawyer, wounding him 3 times. The courier, as in the previous case, did not enter the premises but simply turned around and left, leaving the bleeding victims to die. However, there was another person in the house, Judge Esther Salas, who was the wife and mother of the victims. The woman, shortly before the incident, had gone down to the basement to sort through things and did not hear the gunshots. When she came upstairs, she first saw her son lying in a pool of blood at the door. Esther rushed to him, tried to stem the wound, called out for her husband's help, and only then saw that a bloodied Mike was lying on the stairs. Salas immediately called emergency services, reporting the incident, and tried to provide aid to her husband and son herself. By the time law enforcement and paramedics arrived, both men were alive but in extremely critical condition. They were immediately taken to the nearest hospital, where they underwent surgery and, it seemed, their condition was stabilized. The criminal's motive was unclear, and it was also uncertain whether he came to end the life of the judge, her lawyer husband, a former prosecutor, or intended to eliminate the entire family. Again, no traces or clues were found at the scene, and the only evidence consisted of bullets fired at the victims. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case, immediately suspecting a connection between this incident and the murder of Mark Angelucci in California. In both cases, the targets were lawyers, and the shooter disguised himself as a FedEx courier. However, the agents were confident that in the second case, the true target was the judge, and her relatives were merely collateral victims. Eyewitnesses' final account. Ballistic analysis established that the shooter used a .380 caliber pistol in both incidents, and all bullets were fired from the same weapon. This dispelled any remaining doubts that the acts were committed by the same individual. But who was this person? Where could he be found? And where, when, and to whom might he strike next? It was necessary to question the surviving witness who had come face to face with the criminal, and had even exchanged a few words. After a serious surgery, Daniel was in the intensive care unit in critical condition, but when he regained consciousness, he expressed a desire to speak with detectives to tell them everything he had seen. The young man couldn't describe the perpetrator's appearance because he was masked, but he thought the individual was elderly, as he could see gray at the temples, wrinkles around the eyes, and the courier's hands appeared old. Behind the courier, near the road, Daniel noticed a light-colored car, though he couldn't remember the make. The student also speculated that the criminal's target might have been his mother, as the attacker had inquired if she was home. However, at that moment, his father appeared on the stairs, apparently startling the criminal. The attacker quickly drew his pistol, shot the young man in the chest, and then began shooting at Mike, wounding him 3 times. After being injured, Daniel remembered nothing until he woke up in the hospital. The student's testimony provided little help to the investigation except to confirm that the shooter was an older white male. Regrettably, Daniel's condition could not be stabilized. He worsened, and the day after speaking with law enforcement, the 20-year-old passed away in the hospital from a resultant internal bleeding. Who is Esther Salas? Thus, detectives unanimously concluded that the main target of the shooter was indeed Esther Salas, but her husband and son were inadvertently in the way, and now the young man was deceased, while his father still hovered between life and death. It was urgent to understand what linked Salas and the earlier deceased Angelucci, what cases they were handling, and if they had common adversaries. Esther Salas was born in 1968 in Monterey Park, California. She had Cuban roots on her mother's side and Mexican on her father's. The girl who grew up in poverty achieved everything in life through her intellect and hard work. She attended Rutgers University for law school and earned her Juris Doctor in 1994. She built a stellar career, progressing from a clerk to an assistant U.S. public defender and eventually to a United States magistrate judge in New Jersey. She also served several years as the president of the Hispanic Lawyers Association. Since 2011, she had been a judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of New Jersey. In 1993, Esther married renowned lawyer Mike Andrell, who was 11 years her senior. The couple desperately dreamed of having a child, but Esther struggled to conceive. After 4 consecutive miscarriages, doctors declared that she would never have children. However, a miracle happened on July 13, 2000, when the couple's only child, a son named Daniel, was born. The spouses adored their child, raising him in an atmosphere of love and care, striving to provide him with the best education and wide opportunities in life. Unfortunately, just a week after the young man celebrated his 20th birthday, he was gone. An unexpected turn in the case. News about a courier criminal operating across the country went viral on the internet, spreading rapidly and sowing panic among the population. With no precise information available about the investigation, wild rumors about the case began to emerge. People simply feared opening their doors to couriers, even though during the pandemic, they were often the bearers of necessities. Several days later, on a deserted dead-end road near Rockland in northern New York, an abandoned beige sedan was found. Nearby lay the body of a man with a gunshot wound to the head. Documents found in the car quickly helped identify the deceased as 72-year-old Roy Den Hollander, a once successful lawyer. Near the body lay a pistol, and the scene resembled a self-deprivation of life, as there were no signs of struggle or the presence of third parties. These assumptions were soon confirmed, as the murder weapon bore only the victim's fingerprints. However, the weapon itself drew significant interest from investigators. It was a .380 caliber pistol, identical to the one used to end the lives of Mark Angelucci and Daniel Andrell. Ballistic analysis soon confirmed that all 3 men were deprived of life by bullets fired from this pistol. Yet, it remained unclear what motivated the shooter to end the lives of 2 men, injure another, and then fire a bullet into his own head. A search of Hollander's home indicated that he had meticulously planned the attacks in advance. His diary contained addresses of the victims and notes on the dates of the attacks. Detectives, however, could not understand the criminal's motive. However, when they found memoirs on his laptop, which Roy had been working on for years, it became clear that he was a mentally unstable individual, embittered and angry at the world, who despised everyone from his own mother and ex-wife to his neighbors, colleagues, and clients. It was only a matter of time before he would take up arms and begin to end lives. Who was Roy Den Hollander? Roy Den Hollander was born on September 26, 1947, in Midland Park, New Jersey. He had an older fraternal twin brother who died under mysterious circumstances in childhood. Roy blamed his mother for this his entire life, a sentiment he openly discussed in his memoirs, along with his hatred for his parents. He graduated from high school in 1965, then attended the prestigious George Washington University Law School, and later earned an MBA from Columbia Business School. He worked as a lawyer at several renowned firms, and in the late 1990s, he moved to Russia, where he lived for several years, working as a lawyer and private detective at Kroll Associates, a consulting firm specializing in financial issues and risk. Hollander earned significant money, which he immediately spent in various elite entertainment venues on young, beautiful women, who were his main weakness. In 2000, at a Moscow nightclub, the 52-year-old American lawyer met a 24-year-old beauty named Angelina Shipolina. Previously a professional track athlete, she later decided to switch to modeling, possessing all the attributes necessary to succeed in that field. The aspiring model quickly realized that the older American was utterly infatuated with her and decided to use him for her purposes. She swiftly swept him off his feet and gently nudged him towards marriage. After moving to the United States and obtaining a marriage visa, she soon filed for divorce. Now, Angelina could legally stay in the country and pursue her modeling career. For the lawyer, this turn of events was a huge blow. He realized that the beauty had merely used him to achieve her own goals, playing with his emotions. He came to despise all women, a sentiment he eloquently expressed in his memoirs. He referred to his former wife as a venal woman, willing to do anything for money, and also accused her of connections with the Russian mafia. Fundamental stance and puzzling motives for the crimes. Following his tumultuous divorce from Cipollina, Roy became a self-proclaimed anti-feminist and an active advocate for men's rights. However, his behavior grew increasingly eccentric and flamboyant. Unlike Angelucci, who provided free assistance to men affected by domestic abuse and handled custody issues during divorces, Hollander became notorious for his frivolous and unsuccessful lawsuits. For instance, he objected to ladies' night promotions in bars and nightclubs where women are offered free admission and complimentary drinks. Yet, it remained unclear why Roy chose his victims and sought to deprive them of life. The situation with Angelucci was particularly puzzling, since they were effectively colleagues, both fighting for men's rights. The answer to this question was soon found in the criminal's memoirs. It turned out that Roy saw Mark as a rival and was extremely jealous of him because Mark was far more successful in his career, commanded widespread respect, and held considerable influence, whereas Hollander had been mostly ridiculed for his antics and bizarre lawsuits over the last decade. Furthermore, both lawyers were members of the same men's rights community, making Roy appear even more outlandish and unsuccessful by contrast. About a year before these tragic events, he was expelled from the community for aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Roy's personal life and career spiraled downward after his divorce from the Russian model. He fell into depression, developed problems with alcohol and anger management, and started losing most of the cases he took on. Esther Salas, as a judge, presided over several cases Hollander had handled at different times, consistently ruling against him, which led him to long-list her as one of his sworn enemies. However, neither Salas, Angelucci, nor any of their colleagues considered Roy to be dangerous. But in 2018, when he was diagnosed with cancer, the lawyer likely felt he had nothing left to lose and began devising a plan for revenge and the elimination of his enemies. The long list of revenge. Hollander never made explicit threats, so it was difficult to determine whom he considered his enemies. However, in his memoirs and notebooks, a lengthy list of names was found with whom the lawyer apparently planned to settle scores. This list included not only judges and fellow lawyers, but also the doctors who treated him, whom he accused of incompetence and intentionally treating him poorly, allowing his disease to progress. Detectives checked all the other individuals on the list and, ensuring they were alive, warned them of potential danger, as it was unclear whether the criminal had acted alone or had accomplices. It also remained unclear why Roy stopped and unexpectedly settled accounts with life. There was speculation that this was due to the deteriorating state of his health. Hollander's memoirs contained over 2,000 pages. Also, about a dozen notebooks and diaries were found among his personal belongings, which needed to be meticulously examined. This process took several weeks, but ultimately established that the criminal acted alone and had no accomplices, meaning that everyone else on the list was safe following Roy's death. Daniel Anderl's Law. After the attack, Mike Anderl spent over half a year in the hospital undergoing a challenging rehabilitation process due to 3 gunshot wounds. His wife, Esther Salas, remained in a prolonged state of depression due to the loss of their only son. However, in February 2021, she agreed to give an extensive interview for the television news magazine 60 Minutes, where she spoke publicly for the first time about the horrific events and the tragedy that struck their family. Simultaneously, the judge began working on legislative changes in New Jersey. a new law adopted in December 2021 was named after her late son, Daniel. The new amendments introduced a prohibition on the public disclosure of judges' addresses and other contact information, ensuring the safety and privacy of public officials and their family members. Not a good morning. A woman's corpse was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts, in the early morning hours of July 4, 2011. The find was discovered by a woman riding a bicycle whose path took her near a swampy area. While riding, she was admiring the scenery. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to something fanciful and out of place. When curiosity got the better of her, the woman came closer and was horrified. Not far from the road, a dead girl lay among the grass and mud. To all appearances, the poor girl had not drowned, but had encountered unprecedented cruelty. A wound was visible on her neck, and a bungee cord was tangled in her hair. Coping with her excitement, the bystander dialed emergency services and reported what she had seen. Suddenly, her plans for the day changed. She put aside her business and waited for the police. Upon arriving on the scene, law enforcement officers pulled the body onto dry land and examined it, after which it was immediately sent for forensic examination. The girl had been in the water for a short time, so her appearance had not undergone significant changes. Officers recognized 18-year-old Lauren Astley, universally wanted since the previous evening. Lauren had been reported missing the previous day after she failed to return home or turn up for a meeting with friends. CCTV cameras recorded her entering the shopping center where she worked as a sales clerk at around 10 a.m. on July 3rd and leaving the building at 6:45 p.m. after finishing her shift. It was established that Astley was on the phone with someone at this time. Unfortunately, that was the last time she was seen alive. She was never heard from after that. Malcolm, the heroine's father, began to worry. After all, his daughter was characterized by punctuality and was true to her word. Therefore, if she had said she would be home by the appointed time, she would do so. She would not change her route for no apparent reason. At most, she would have reported that she was running late. Mr. Astley therefore realized that something bad had happened, and without wasting time, reported the disappearance to the police. The police officers did not wait for the allotted time and started the search immediately. In parallel, the girl's family and friends joined in. By the way, word of mouth worked quickly, and the news that she was missing instantly spread among acquaintances. Soon in the parking lot of the local beach was found a red Jeep, the car of the missing. The car stood with the windows down, and her personal belongings, a purse and a laptop, lay inside the car. However, the girl herself was not in it. It was also unclear where she could have gone after leaving the vehicle so precariously. When Malcolm was informed of the discovery of the car, he immediately drove to the spot. There, he tried to figure out where his daughter had gone. He walked along the shore and shone a flashlight into the water, looking for her as if she had drowned. Lauren's friends arrived after him. They decided to spend the night at the site, hoping to be the first to spot her. All night they scoured the area and wondered where Lauren had disappeared to. The young men didn't know what to think or where to look for her. However, none of them could imagine that something irreparable had happened to Lauren. It seemed like something that only happened in the movies. The person you had been talking and laughing with not so long ago couldn't just disappear like that. Not 12 hours later, Lauren's body was found. The first person the officers called was her father. They informed about the terrible discovery and asked to come to the identification. Malcolm's eyes to the last refused to believe that the girl lying on the pathologist's table, his daughter. However, coming to his senses, the man officially recognized his child. In front of him lay his girl, young and bright, who recently had her whole life ahead of her. Unbearable pain pierced the man's heart. Nevertheless, nothing could be brought back or undone. At this point, he had to do two important things: to report the terrible news to his former spouse and find the culprit in the death of his daughter. When the sad news spread throughout the city, no one could not believe what had happened. Family and close acquaintances in one voice said that Lauren had no enemies or ill-wishers. The only one on whom suspicion involuntarily fell was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was spoken with great hesitation, as everyone knew how much he loved Lauren and would never hurt her. However, the deformations that happen to a person who has gone through a breakup are different. And who knows what someone who is unable to let go of the past is capable of? First love. First love is a very strong feeling. Coming into a person's life, it changes it completely, ruins the usual way of life. Such emotions nourish and inspire, dilute reality with new colors. Together with it comes the first kiss, the first intimate experience, the first departure from the parental home, the first job, and so on. This is a very vivid segment of life, when some sensations are superimposed on others. But often such love is fleeting. Someone breaks up because they are separated by circumstances, someone could not cope with the resulting contradictions, and someone simply realized that they do not fit each other. After that, there remains a certain incompleteness and understatement, which excites until the end of days. One way or another, but most of us go through it. However, not everyone has the fortitude to get over it and move on, to thank the person for the time spent and say goodbye to them. This story is about the flip side of love, the heavy addiction and jealousy that ruined young hearts. Lauren Astley and Nathaniel Fujita are the envy of the entire high school. She is a petite, pretty brown girl who stands out from everyone with her activity and uniqueness. He is a tall, ambitious soccer player, the object of adoration of many girls. Despite the fact that young people were acquainted from an early age, they revealed themselves to each other later. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a very colorful romance with all the consequences. They fought and made up. They would break up and get back together. Both had a difficult character, but the lovers tried to cherish the fragile feeling that arose between them. This continued, at least for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Dunn Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child in the family of Mary and Malcolm. From this, their attention was completely focused on the little girl. Since both parents worked as teachers, important values were instilled in her from an early age. Their most important wish was for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, the couple Astley divorced. However, this did not affect the upbringing of the girl. Each of them still continued to care about her and support Lauren in all endeavors, and they have a young beauty was a lot. She was constantly fascinated by something, and her whole day was scheduled by the minute. Her versatile interests were amazing. Lauren was fond of tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. She was also a member of her church choir, a counselor at a children's camp, and had a starring role in a theater production of Annie at the local arts center. No school or town concert was without her participation. Many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active and omnipresent. The second direction of the girl's hobbies was social activity. Astley participated in many charitable actions. At the age of 12, she helped victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana. Afterward, she visited the area 2 more times on a similar mission. She had a big and kind heart, open to the world and people. Therefore, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Everyone around her knew that she could be called upon at any time for help or advice. Nathaniel Fujita went to high school with Lauren. He was an outstanding player on the school soccer team and showed great promise. By the way, he also dreamed of connecting his future life with sports. He was known as a diligent student and the soul of the company. The young man was the eldest son of Beta and Tom Fujita. It can be said that his family was prosperous and quite famous in certain circles. His father was a famous guitarist and professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston. He was different from many and was an unconventional person. Perhaps the romantic relationship between Lauren and Nate just on this ground. One day, the girl interviewed the boyfriend's father for a school assignment. After that, she began to appear in their house more often, and when young people stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate and go to visit each other. As I said earlier, the first 2 years of the relationship between the lovers were perfect. They were very attractive young people, and their couple was eye-catching. Nate and Lori did everything together, going out, playing sports, studying, and participating in activities. However, later on, from such a close connection became stuffy. The guy did not let the girl go anywhere alone and controlled everywhere. He was jealous of her to every pillar, and often he saw things that were not. Nathaniel wanted to get all her attention and not share it with anyone. This was the reason for the conflicts between them. They became more frequent as the young man began to react more aggressively. But at the same time, no one heard Lauren complain about any physical impact. In general, their relationship became like an emotional seesaw. The state of calm was lost. It didn't suit both of them, but they couldn't go back to their previous easy feelings anymore. Lauren more than once thought about the future, and closer to the end of her schooling decided on her future life. She outlined all the pros and cons of her relationship with Nate on a sheet of paper and clearly realized that it was time to say goodbye. She'd also always disliked the way he acted around her mom. Lauren had unwittingly projected their relationship onto her supposed life with him, and she didn't want that kind of behavior. On top of that, the impending enrollment played a big part. Their life paths were already diverging. Lauren was applying to Alona University in North Carolina, and her boyfriend was invited to Trinity College in Connecticut to play soccer there. Breakup. Lauren announced the fateful decision on April 1st, 2011, on her birthday. She considered it the best timing, as there was still time ahead to come to terms with new realities and start their lives with a clean slate. Everyone had new acquaintances and busyness ahead of them that would help push the sad thoughts away. Nathaniel, however, did not share Lauren's aspirations. He felt a deep sense of loss and loneliness. He was no longer excited about going to college. He stopped practicing and partying. All he did all day was lie on the couch and watch TV. The guy fell into a deep depression that he could no longer control. All around noted that from a formerly active and energetic young man, he turned into a withdrawn and depressed. In addition, Fujita became addicted to alcohol and pot. In this way, he wanted to distract himself from the harsh reality. It was hard for Lauren to see him like that, much less be the cause of it. The girl asked her friends for advice on what to do in such a case and how to help him, but everyone recommended her not to interfere and to give him time to get over this pain on his own. Otherwise, he could regard her participation as a chance that everything could be corrected and returned. Her friend's advice was sound. She shouldn't have shown her face to him, for at the sight of her, his condition worsened. Unfortunately, the girl had become his trigger. Looking a little ahead, in the aftermath, her kindness and desire to help turned against her. After graduation, Astley, along with her friends, organized a big party, which was attended by about 150 people. The event was held under a huge dome, where young people danced and had fun. Among the invitees also turned out and the ex-boyfriend of the heroine. At the party, Nathan came quite drunk. Seeing Lauren dancing in the middle of the dance floor, he approached her to talk, but she asked him not to bother her and not to ruin the party. There was no point in having idle conversations. Everything had been said several times before. And secondly, she did not want to communicate with him in such a state. However, the guy kept up with her and asked her to start all over again. With each passing minute, his mood worsened, and his aggression manifested itself with greater force. At one point, he became so angry that he stepped aside and hit the pole holding the structure with all his might. In response, the structure staggered and collapsed. The celebration was hopelessly ruined. Everyone expressed displeasure and a desire for Nathan to leave the party. Later, Lauren came to her mother in tears and confessed to her that the former boyfriend does not leave her alone and follows her everywhere. The girl added that at the graduation event, he wouldn't let anyone dance with her and behave disgustingly. He was angry that she was happy without him. Suspect. When the police learned Lauren was missing, the first thing they did was to question everyone she was close to. One way or another, all roads led to Fujita. Only he seemed to have a motive to harm her. However, his entire entourage assured her otherwise. However, officers in the course of their practice had more than once come across cases where crimes were committed by people who were not expected to do so. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives on the doorstep. During the conversation, the boy looked confused. He seemed impressed by the sudden disappearance of his beloved. He admitted that he had seen her recently, around 7 o'clock in the evening. The girl stopped by him in her car, after which they had a nice conversation, and then she drove away. According to the guy, their conversation did not take more than 5 minutes. In addition, the young man added that at the time of Lauren's disappearance, he was at home and did not go anywhere. True, his alibi was difficult to confirm since he was alone at the time. His mother agreed with her son's words. Mrs. Fujita admitted that she had also seen Nathan's ex-girlfriend that day. She visited her at the mall where the latter worked part-time. The woman was saddened by the changes that had occurred in her son. That's why she asked Lauren to talk to him. The fact is that the parents of the young man had already sought help from a psychiatrist, but his services were ineffective. Their son had lost all interest in life and just existed. Beta hoped Lauren's words would give him strength, or at least a sense of male pride in him so he could move on. The request had put a crimp in Lauren's plans, but the meeting wasn't supposed to take a long time, so no one knew about it. It turned out that the phone conversation recorded by the mall's security cameras had taken place between her and Nathan just after the meeting with his mother. The girl was still continuing to worry about her ex-boyfriend, so she dialed him and arranged to see him. At 7:05 p.m., Astley drove up to Fujita's house and sent a text message with the word "here." The information that Nathaniel and Beta provided was certainly valuable information for the police officers. However, it was not clear where Lauren had gone after that and why her car was left open on the beach. The case became clearer in the morning when the body of the poor girl was accidentally found in the swamp. Convinced that the corpse of the girl probably belongs to Lauren Astley, the detectives decided to visit Nathan again. This time, however, he was not at home. They didn't need his presence, though. The officers had a search warrant, needed evidence to confirm the version of the investigation about the involvement of the former lover in the murder. The examination began with the garage. Experienced specialists immediately became clear that something bad had happened in it. Somewhere on the floor were found bloodstains, and on the wall in a prominent place hung several elastic cords. They matched those tangled in the murdered girl's hair. Traces of blood were also found in the house. The doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink contained faint splatters. It was obvious that someone had tried to mop them up, but had done so sloppily and apparently in a hurry. A black gym bag was found in the basement. Inside it were wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathan's bedroom, in a kind of hiding place, detectives found a pair of bloody shoes, wet, bloody clothes. The mud found on the shoes seemed to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body had been located. But the samples found had to be submitted to a lab for an official conclusion. Time later, experts confirmed the detectives' assumptions. They also determined that the blood found in Fujita's house belonged to the deceased. Undeniable evidence of Nathan's involvement in the ex-girlfriend's death had been obtained. However, his whereabouts were still unknown. Therefore, soon, the guy was declared wanted. The investigation of the case progressed with inconceivable speed. A few hours later, the suspect was found. All this time, he was staying with a cousin in a neighboring town. Eventually, on the morning of July 5, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. At the time of his arrest, he was aloof and quiet, and offered no resistance. At the same time, he did not cooperate with the investigation during interrogation. He didn't say anything about the crime he was charged with. The detectives had two thoughts about it. Either he could not find an excuse for his behavior, or he was afraid to say too much. So he didn't say a word. Investigators' version. The investigation believed that Lauren Astley visited the ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother. The girl was worried about him, so she decided to talk to him and cheer him up a little. After that, the two of them proceeded to Fujita's garage. There, a quarrel may have taken place, after which Nathan attacked her and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing the girl, he drove her red Jeep to the beach and threw the car keys into a storm drain. By the way, they were later found. The intruder then returned home, put his lover in his car, and drove her to the swamp. Following this, he tried to hide the traces of the crime. Despite the fact that he had not previously been physically violent towards Lauren, it was obvious to everyone that her boyfriend was periodically unrestrained and capable of aggression. Thus, his motives were unwillingness to come to terms with the breakup and underlying resentment. During a preliminary hearing on August 23, 2011, Nathaniel was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. When the boyfriend was asked if he would plead guilty to the crimes charged, he barely audibly uttered, "No." So it became clear that his lawyers had engaged in foul play, having come up with a certain line of conduct and defense. As a result, The prosecutor filed a motion to keep the defendant in jail without the possibility of bail. The court granted the prosecutor's request. Trial. On February 13, 2013, Fujita appeared in court. Nathaniel's attorney, William Sullivan, pleaded the defendant's insanity. He did not deny that a murder had been committed, however. He stated the following. On the evening of July 3, 2011, due to severe clinical depression, the defendant had a psychopathic attack. At that time, the guy was unable to give an account of his actions, so he attacked the girl. Nathan's friends confirmed the words of the defender in terms of changes in his behavior. They told about the fact that he really changed and stopped appearing in the company. Everyone was struck by the fact that previously he was just sick of soccer and did not miss training even during illness. And after parting with Lauren overnight, he stopped being interested in something that was a huge part of his life. The psychiatrist that Fujita visited also spoke at the court hearing. It was he who diagnosed his patient and suggested medication and therapy. However, Nathaniel refused. At trial, it was suggested that the defendant's mental health problems may have stemmed not only from the painful breakup, but primarily because of the athlete's numerous repetitive head injuries. And the breakup exacerbated the situation and triggered a severe seizure. However, the prosecution was not in agreement with the arguments of the defense attorney. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern said that the defendant was aware of what was happening, acted in a planned and calculated manner, and the crime was committed out of base motives. It was found that the guy constantly stalked the girl and did not give her peace. Even that day, a few hours before the end of her working day, he appeared in the shopping center and watched her, which is confirmed by CCTV footage. And Lauren's situation at his mother's request was an opportunity for Nathan to put his criminal intent into action. Witness testimony corroborated the prosecution's case. Fujita was clearly unrepentant. One eyewitness reported seeing Nathan returning home on the unfortunate evening and music playing in his car. A cousin also gave denunciatory testimony against a relative. She said that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother called her and offered to hang out, but the girl was busy, so she refused, to what he got very angry and said that he wanted to distract himself, but apparently it will not work. The next day, when the news of Lauren's death became known, his cousin contacted him again. She asked him if he knew, to which he replied that no one would ever know the truth about her death or where the murder weapon was located. In addition, he admitted that he had driven the ex's car to the town beach. Thus, the sister realized that Nathaniel was involved in the incident and persuaded him to turn himself in. It turned out that in 2009, when the young people broke up once again, there was one curious incident. Lauren, together with her friends, went to the disco. There was a guy who did not hide his interest in her. After the breakup, Lauren decided to give a chance to a new admirer, and they even kissed. But Nathan saw this and lunged at his rival with his fists. He threatened to slit the young man's throat if he ever came near Lauren again. So it was clear that Nathan was a jealous man. And when he drank alcohol, he lost his temper and became capable of many things, especially given the nature of the injuries Lauren had sustained as a result of the murder. This event confirmed Fujita's violent rage and also indirectly pointed to him as the culprit. In addition, other heinous circumstances came to light. The body of the deceased was found to have wounds that had been inflicted before her death. Among them, there were clear signs of so-called defensive wounds. The girl had tried to resist. A forensic psychiatrist invited by the prosecution also assessed the defendant's condition. However, unlike the previous one, he stated that at the time of the crime, he was in his right mind and made informed decisions. The fierce struggle between the prosecution and the defense came down to the fact that if Fujita was found insane, his sentence would be significantly reduced. Of course, this did not absolve him of the charges, but it did greatly diminish his guilt. This trial was emotional in every sense. In attendance were relatives on both sides. These men had previously been friends with each other. In this situation, they were each hurting in their own way. Nathaniel's parents cried the whole time. They could not believe what had happened and felt immense guilt for their son. The weight of his actions fell on the shoulders of his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were heartbroken. They had lost their only daughter prematurely. Lauren was dying in agony at the hands of the man she loved. Specialists concluded that the girl had lived for several minutes after the cord around her throat was tightened and cut. Lauren's mother wanted to understand why this had happened to her daughter and how long it had been planned, the verdict, and life afterward. After a 3-week trial, on March 7, 2013, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all charges. The jury took 1 day to reach a final verdict. The 20-year-old was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After the verdict, Lauren's father walked up to Nathan's parents and hugged them. His act showed the strength of the man's character and the depth of his heart. Both families had lost the most precious thing they had. Mary and Malcolm Astley later established the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund to teach teens about healthy relationships. They believed that the crime Nathaniel committed was preventable. The girl's family has dedicated their future lives to spreading awareness on how to avoid couple violence and get over a breakup. In 2024, the state Superior Court abolished mandatory life without parole sentences for those under the age of 20 at the time of the offense. Thus, Nathaniel had the opportunity to be free. Is that fair? Considering that he took the life of an innocent girl forever and deprived her parents of happiness and peace. There is an opinion that from love to hate is one step. Obsessive love combined with bouts of jealousy and selfishness sometimes leads to crazy acts. The story of the Fujita and Astley families is a sad example of this.